just press the button. Let me know when you're ready for that.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. We are live, episode 390 of Keeping Karlsson. Thank you for joining us for another live show.
Hey, yeah, it's great to be here. Back in the saddle. We've got a huge show tonight. Like this is I was saying to Elon off air. This is a mega show.
Yeah, I probably went too ham with my prep because I was also like the hours. The hours were going by. Well, I had the idea for the show, and then it was like, well, now that I've like had this idea and I'm like halfway through, I can't stop now. At the end I like had to like just fill in some like percentages. So the plan, by the way, I'll say this on the actual show, but yeah, the plan is like we're doing a hot streak and a cold streak for each 5% percent rostered band on Yahoo. And by the end, I was like done
like 10.
I could have done every time. Well, the thing is, some of them I had like lots of like, I had it. And then it was at the end, I was just filling it in players I wasn't even planning. Like I wasn't planning on talking about Matt Duchene today, but I was looking at like 75% to 80%.
Here we are.
Well, it was like I had to pick someone. And I was like, I guess I could bring up Matt Duchene. It's like, I know the answer. You could be quick on him. Just be like, yeah, he's good. We said he was good before. Still good.
Why don't you just do the show yourself?
I mean, for the ones that I know what your answer is going to be, I can. Some of them are tricky.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to it. I think we've got some good, like right off the top, some really strong Elias Lindholm and Kris Kreider content.
Okay. That's what people are here for. And plus we've got a wrecking crew here in the chat. We got Shams, Adam. It's a good crew to get the show going and off to the right start.
Love this wrecking crew. Did you watch the documentary? Is that why you?
No, what is that?
Do you know the Wrecking Crew?
Is that it's a band, I assume?
They're one of the best like session bands, like the most famous and prolific session bands ever. They did like Motown and soul and R&B records in the 60s.
Good for them, yeah. It's
great. You should watch it. It's great. I haven't
Send me the link.
watched
I don't
the
know.
Documentary.
So why are you telling me it's great if you haven't watched it?
Well, I believe it's good because I know about them already.
I heard that there's a good documentary called Beatles Anthology. I was hanging out with a friend yesterday. He said I need to watch Beatles Anthology.
I can't tell if you're teasing me now.
No, I'm not. I actually want to watch it.
Well, there's the Let It Be. It's not called Beatles Anthology. I forget what it's called, but it's on. It is 4 parts, and they're each like 2.5 to 3 hours.
So there's not a documentary called Beatles Anthology? That's amazing.
I don't know what Beatles Anthology is.
It's
but
like it's old. Okay, I'm talking about an old thing. The new one's called Get Back, and it's a new one. And anyways,
there you go.
Anyway, Mason's in the Wrecking Crew.
Wow, Mason, that's amazing.
That session band or the crew here, man. This crew really is hot now. We've also got Lewis, Ashley, Darian V. Oh my god,
we are still. Right. I'm still high on pasta. Are you still high on pasta?
I mean, I'm higher than I was before. Even what do you mean still high? I'm more high.
You're higher.
I'm higher because my main thing I was nervous about was like, if he's away from Bergeron and Marchand, then maybe he won't be able to do as well. And now we're seeing like, no, he's fine.
If he can produce, I think that he can, the way things are going, he can produce from the second line what we would have expected from him on the first line, roughly, and still get that top power play. Like, I feel like we're back in business here.
So why is Darian trying to trade him? I mean, let us know who you can get.
Just thinking of it.
If you can get McDavid, who's on a bit of a cold streak, that would be a good return, I think. I don't know if you could pull that off. Throw in a pick.
Get Back, I want to watch when I find 12 hours in my life.
Well, apparently you should watch Beatles Anthology first, because I was telling my friend... Okay, I was telling my friend yesterday, who's a big Beatles person, he was talking about Get Back, and I was like, I've never watched a Beatles documentary, but I'd be interested to learn about the Beatles. Should I watch Get Back? And he's like, well, first... you should watch Beatles Anthology because that's like the best documentary of all time.
The thing with the Beatles is that there's endless content, like endless releases from them and like remasters and like studio versions and documentaries.
Sure. Yeah.
I kind of don't want to go back to the start.
Okay, well, anyways, this guy said that that's the best thing, but watch what you want. I don't care. I don't even care about the Beatles.
Soul is also, I really want to watch that.
So we do have a big packed show, so I guess we should probably get started here. All right.
Instead of talking about music.
About bands we don't even care that much about. Okay, let's go.
I don't even like the Beatles.
I mean, they're fine. I'm not. Maybe after I watch this documentary, I'll be super into them. Like, I'm not obsessed with the Beatles. I'm not like one of these people that's like, hot take, Beatles are shit. Like, I'm not one of those people.
Are there those people?
Yeah, of course. Anything that's popular, there's people who like think they're so smart by being, actually, Shakespeare's plays are quite amateur if you think about it for the following reasons. It's like there's always people like that.
I don't think I've ever heard a legitimate. Yeah, but I don't think there's. I think the Beatles might be the exception.
Google
Well, okay, on the internet, you're going to find it. But in general, I think you'll find a lot less counter Beatles stuff than counter anything else popular.
My whole life is on the internet. I don't even know where these other places are that you're referring to that I'm supposed to go.
I don't know.
You're talking about like on my work Slack, I guess? Does that count as the internet or no?
I just think you're less likely to run into somebody who's going to say, hey, man, like, don't worry, like the Beatles suck, than you are like the insert popular thing here sucks.
What about like with like the Gen Z crowd? Don't you think some of them will be like, what is this garbage? Because they don't realize that it was an influence. It's like, because people who are like young don't understand that the things they're listening to now is influenced by a previous thing, which is influenced by a previous thing. So it's like it's significant and good for its time. But like, are the Beatles songs good compared to current songs? I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that.
Great question. I don't know how the Beatles sound to a Gen Zer.
Well, one day you'll have one, or I guess your daughter will be like a different generation, but you'll be able to ask. We should probably start. We have like a 2-hour plus show here. Probably.
But like I'm already playing the Beatles for her, so like she's getting acclimatized.
Oh, I see. Okay. Are you going in order? Like you'll play her like 60s for a couple years, then you'll go to 70s, 80s?
No, I made a compilation of a bunch of
I see.
The ones that I thought would be good to share with her.
When you're going to get her into video games, I think it would be interesting to start her with Pong and go to Mario and like sort of, ramp her up quickly. But like
noted. If you can help supply, if you want to write like that curriculum or syllabus, then
well, we have the Discord channel of video games. I'll bet you there's people there that would be happy to do that are more knowledgeable than me.
First, do this. Okay. Well, I need the instructions and I need all the games and systems. So if someone wants to do that for me, I'm in.
I mean, like I think if you have a Nintendo Switch, then you can get like all the Nintendo. Like I think they have like all the Nintendo, Super Nintendo. You could just get it all.
Hey man, we have a Wii U and we can get all that
You
stuff.
Could do it on the Wii U. I didn't even know that system. I thought that system just like fizzled. Are you the only person who bought a Wii U?
It did fizzle, and I bought it like 7 years after release. And honestly, it's like the greatest system I've ever owned.
Wow, look at you. All right,
it's just
let's start.
So versatile. Nintendo's great. I love Nintendo. Okay.
Okay, it's not a paid advertisement, everybody. Okay.
Yeah, it could
start the show.
Nintendo, if you're listening, call. Okay. All right.
Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys, one of whom is very proudly wearing a Panthers hat right now. I feel like I bought this hat specifically for this week's show because they are just going nuts right now. Go Panthers! I'm your host, Dylan Dubrowski. With me, as always, for a really fun show where we're going to be going through every single 5% band of Yahoo percent rostered and discuss a hot streak and cold streak from each of those bands. I don't know who came up with this crazy idea and how we're going to fit this into a regular show. With me to go on this journey with you is my great friend, the fantasy hockey robot, the IPP MVP, Brian Kopp.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. Yes, we are here with a mega show coming at you. Elon, I don't know where you got this idea either to do this giant show in our usual slot, but I'm ready. Like I've done my research. We're prepped, we're locked, we're loaded, and we're ready to go. And you might be wearing the Florida Panthers hat, Elon, but I am wearing my Keeping Karlsson Champions t-shirt, which shows just one of us is invested in the podcast as much as they should be.
I don't understand what's the dig here that I should be like supporting the pod and not the Panthers.
Yeah, wear our merch, not the Panthers.
Look, man, I'm in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, Tier 1 of the best league in the world, and I've got Duclair, Barkov, and Verhaeghe, and I was losing in my matchup to Kyle, your former nemesis. You may remember from Tier 2 last year. I was losing to him going into Friday, Saturday games for the Panthers, and then they scored like 16 goals in those games, and I came back and won almost all thanks to them. So it is connected to the podcast because now I'm 8-5. I'm on my way to a cupful championship, and one day I'll get one of those shirts.
Well, here's the thing, Elon. You already have one of those shirts, and you have a head and you have a torso, so you could be representing both. But it's okay. This is an
audio show for most people, so I don't think they care too much about it. I just wanted to think of something to start the show. I didn't mean to get too deep into it.
Well, how about we start the show then?
Okay, well, I was ready to go. You're the one who's already circling back. Okay, like we said, we've got a banger for you today. Basically, what happened is I sat down. I was like, I don't know if I have enough players to talk about. Maybe I should come up with a theme, and now we have like a million players to talk about. So, before we get into this show, let's just mention that Keeping Karlsson is very proudly presented by DobberHockey.com, the #1 fantasy hockey website in the world. I love this site. I go there every day. Their tools at Frozen Tools, just phenomenal. They have a schedule tool that I like even better than the schedule tool I made at keepingkarlsson.com/tools. So, hot tip for people, use the the one on Frozen Tools instead of mine. Also, the articles on Dabber Hockey are amazing. Michael Clifford writes great stuff. We just emailed him to ask him if he wants to come on a future show. So Michael, if you're listening, come on over. Dabberhockey.com. It's the best. Now, Brian, once again, the plan for the show. For each 5% band of percent rostered, we're going to do one hot streak and one cold streak, and we're going to do a Keeping Karlsson classic, the question of sustainable or fleeting. Do we think this player, whether it's a hot streak or a cold streak, do you think that what's happening recently, is that going to keep going? Is what you're seeing something that could sustain? Or is this just like a blip in the radar, either hot or cold, and they'll go back to normal afterwards? And of course, if we're talking about a hot streak, I don't mean for us to be like, yeah, Trevor Moore's not going to get 2 assists every night. If I ask you if Trevor Moore is sustainable or fleeting with his hot streak, I guess I mean more is he going to continue to be fantasy relevant and worth rostering? Just to make it clear, some of these hot streaks are over a point per game. I don't think all these players are potentially going to be over a point per game, but some of them will. And let's start at the top here. 95% to 100% rostered. Obviously, I had a lot of great players to choose from, mostly players that are hot because they should be, and it's not a big surprise. I was thinking I could bring up the Bruins again and how people should be lining up to thank Brian for not even wavering a little on David Pastrnak back when he was cold. Brian was try to trade for Pastrnak. It's the right idea. And I was well, but he's on the second line now. Turns out it doesn't matter. But anyway, so I don't need to bring up the Bruins again. We talked about them also last week when they changed up the lines. I've got a couple Panthers planned for later in the show, of course. I could have in this band brought up Jonathan Huberdeau, who's now tied for second in league scoring. I don't know if people are aware of this. McDavid, Ovechkin, and Huberdeau all tied for second, 1 point behind Draisaitl. So this is going to be a fun race. But again, what are we going to say about Huberdeau? He's amazing. Rantanen, by the way, not far behind, currently on pace for a career high 113 points with 44 points in 32 games. If he only didn't miss that handful of games, he'd be in the scoring race as well. So I thought he would have been interesting. But no, I'm going to land my question on a goalie. Okay, I want to quickly discuss Igor Shesterkin, 99% rostered, of course, who I think if we were to do another Schmore Goalies Board show right now, tiering the goalies, I'd be ready to put Shesterkin in tier 1 with Vasilevsky. I think when we talked about him last, I was he's been really great, but, Vasilevsky's someone that's, been more reliable for longer, just someone that we could depend on. But at this point, man, Shesterkin is just money. Coming off COVID protocol, he shut out the Sharks, stopping 37 on Thursday. He helped the Rangers beat Philly, stopping 26 of 28 on Thursday. I'm starting to get to a point where I think we have to consider the Rangers serious cup contenders this year just because they may have the best goalie in the game to go along with all their star skaters. You know how valuable it is to have a goalie like that in the playoffs. We saw Carey Price last year. Brian, 939 save percentage, 1.99 GAA through 23 games. Do you concur with me that Shesterkin is now in tier 1 territory, or do you still see any other reasons why we should doubt him, or is it very clear top 1 or 2 goalies next year in drafts?
Gonna answer your question, but take the sample of my fan.
Oh, good one. Sorry, everybody. I need to be quiet for a second. Okay, good. That's for noise cancellation purposes.
There's the moment of silence for noise cancellation.
All right, go for it.
So you were just saying how pumped you were about Shesterkin.
I said, are you with me that he's top 1 or 2 goalies in drafts next year?
Yes, absolutely. He is. And we mentioned this on our mid-season Schmore Goalies Board that we did a few weeks back, that Shesterkin is the only other goalie that could be considered in that rarefied air that is tier 1 of our goalie tiers, currently occupied solely by Andrei Vasilevsky. But yeah, I think Shesterkin is the second goalie drafted in leagues next year. And I think there's a good chance he could be the second goalie drafted in the first round because he has proven himself to be that reliable. This season, he's second in the league in 5-on-5 pucks stopped above expected, or for the nerds, Delta Fenwick save percentage. Guess who's first, Elon? You never will.
Jack Campbell.
No.
Okay, if I never will, then let's just move on.
Okay, it's Jonathan Quick.
Oh, yeah, he's been good.
By a mile. Yeah, he had some really, really amazing play earlier on in the season. It's kind of been tapering off a little more on him a little later in the show. But yeah, it's Quick, then Shesterkin, and then Ilya Sorokin, Freddie Anderson, and Alex Nedeljkovic round out the pack that's leading the rest of the NHL goaltending crew. And Shesterkin is right up there. And yeah, he seems super reliable. Usually with goalies, we can never feel safe or secure. And usually with any player, we want to see a bit more of a sample before buying in. But I feel like I've seen what I need to see from Igor Shesterkin, not just in his play in the NHL, but everywhere else. This guy's a machine, and I would absolutely put him in tier 1 if we were ranking goalies today.
Okay, so then a cold streak. This is more interesting, right? Someone that's still 95 to 100% rostered on Yahoo, but yet is cold, and we need to start being a little bit concerned. I picked out Elias Lindholm. Is it Elias or Elias? I know it's Elias Pettersson, but do we do Elias Lindholm or Elias Lindholm? What do you think? Does anyone in the chat know the answer to this?
I'm pulling up the guide, Elon.
Sorry for putting an edit point early, but I feel like I just want to get it right.
It's Elias.
Okay, works for me.
Well, how would you pronounce Ligh? Rye. Yeah, it's Elias.
Okay.
Elias.
All right. Okay. I think I want to go with Elias Lindholm. He's 96% rostered on Yahoo, and after starting the season near point per game, he's ran cold over this past month. Only 1 goal and 1 assist in his last 7 games. Last season, Lindholm paced for 69 points. It seemed like he was on track to crush that and get back to closer to like a point per game like he was in his first season in Calgary. But now he's basically sitting at exactly a 70-point pace, so basically same as last year. And like I said, it's kind of been falling pretty quickly lately. In Calgary's latest game versus Ottawa, Coach Sutter reunited the Lindholm, Gaudreau, Tkachuk line after that short stretch where it looked like Coleman might take Gaudreau's spot. So, it's back to the top 3 guys on the top line. Plus, of course, Lindholm has that top power play spot. So, Brian, where do you see Lindholm pacing rest of season? Like, was it the scorching start to the year that was unsustainable, or is it this cold run that won't keep up?
That scorching start to the year, just to put it in numbers, 11 goals and 16 assists for 27 points in Lindholm's first 27 games. Over those 27 games, Lindholm was only held off the score sheet 6 times. That's amazing. On the score sheet, night in, night out. One reason that Elias Lindholm is struggling lately, that he has just 2 points in his last 7 games, that's because Lindholm is shooting just 6% versus the 14% shooting percentage that Lindholm started out the year at. But it's also not just that simple, because Lindholm is also taking just 2 shots per game over this cool stretch compared to 3 shots per game during the hotter one. But it's also a points participation thing where Lindholm is not getting as many points as he generally would based on how many goals are being scored while he's on the ice. Like Lindholm has been on the ice for 12 goals in this last 7-game cold stretch. And, Gaudreau and Tkachuk are still doing great, but Lindholm's only pointed on 2 of those 12 goals. And that's actually been a season-long trend for Lindholm, believe it or not. Just 45% points participation at 5-on-5 versus his usual 65 to 70%. So to me, that actually says, hey, Lindholm should probably be getting in on some more goals than he has been, both when he was cold and when he was hot. So, when you're trying to figure out where Lindholm is for the rest of the year, I mean, we saw Lindholm be an 80-point player in that big Johnny, Money, and Lindholm breakout year that seems further and further in the past. And I actually think Lindholm's own individual numbers look better this year than they did that year. Like Lindholm looks like he might have reached another level, but he's got his 5-on-5 points participation and shooting percentage working against him. That he's still pacing for 70 points is a testament to how great Lindholm had been before running into this cold snap. I love what I'm seeing from him. And I think he makes a really great buy low. If you can find a manager worried that the sky is falling on Elias Lindholm and that this is the chickens coming home to roost, then you find that manager and you try and get Elias Lindholm off him, because then you find that manager and you try and get Elias Lindholm off them, because I'm pretty confident that Elias Lindholm has point per game potential for the rest of the season. And I think at least 70 points the rest of the way is a really reasonable expectation.
Okay, great. I like that. I feel like of all the stats you generally use, that points participation is really compelling, right? If he was on the ice for 12 goals recently and only got in on 2 of them, there's no way that keeps up. So that's just a marker of probably some bad luck. And yeah, so I'm with you. Maybe a potential buy low. Okay, let's go to the 90 to 95% rostered band. Here, I wanted to go back to the Rangers. We already talked about Shesterkin, but let's talk about a top liner here. And Kris Kreider, 92% rostered on Yahoo. I feel like we haven't talked about him yet this season. And it's probably because he runs hot for a bit every season and then cools off. So when he started this year with goals in 3 straight, I almost thought to myself, there's no point asking Brian, is Kreider going to keep it up? I know what he's going to say. He's going to be like, Kreider does this all the time. But checking in now, he's now once again hot. He's scored 3 goals in his last couple games. He has 7 goals, not even points, 7 goals in his last 10 games. Currently sitting at 24 goals and 11 assists in 39 games. That's a 50 goal and 74 point pace if he were to play 82 games at this rate. So Brian, is there any chance that this is the year that Kreider doesn't cool off randomly and keeps doing what he's doing in a sustainable way?
I'm glad you mentioned Kreider's goals, Elon, because that's tells the story of why Kreider's been doing so well. Specifically, his power play goals, where Kreider's career high in goals with the man advantage before this season was 11 power play goals. He got that last year, and he did that in just 50 games. This year, Kreider's already beaten that mark with 12 power play goals in just 39 games. Kreider sits just 1 goal shy of Leon Draisaitl for the league lead and has 3 more than the third-ranked Austin Matthews in power play goals. And those 12 power play goals are basically the reason why Kris Kreider has been so valuable this season, and that's his whole power play contribution. He has 15 power play points, 12 of them are goals. If you look at Kreider's 5-on-5 production, you're not going to see anything special this year. It's actually right in line with Kreider's 5-on-5 play last season when he paced for just 49 points. So this means anybody with Kreider needs to think, can he keep leaning on that power play goal production that he's shown so far? And my answer is that I don't think that he can. He's shooting 40% with the man advantage. That's almost twice as high as I'd expect. Then again, we always have to give the Braden Point caveat here because he shot 40% with the man advantage for an entire season a couple years ago. He just kept cashing in over and over. So it's not impossible that Kreider can keep up this heater for another 43 regular season games. But it's not something that you want to bet on, that Kreider can keep scoring power play goals and goals period at this pace. So if I have Kreider as good as he's been, I'm starting to send out feelers in the trade market to see what I can get back for him. The good news, if you do have him and are planning on holding on, is that Kreider's power play role has definitely increased these last 2 seasons where he's shooting more shots and scoring more goals. But if those don't keep up the way they've been, and I don't think they will, if I had to bet, Kreider's going to be turning back into a 60, 65 point player over the course of the rest of the year. And Elon, I'm going to preempt your question. Yes, I would trade Kris Kreider for Elias Lindholm.
Okay, interesting. I was just thinking that. So yeah, you could definitely read my mind here, and that wasn't in the prep talk. Lewis just said in the chat here, Lewis, by the way, Lewis Ezekiel from Short Shifts, and you'll hear from him in a couple days. He said, I bet Kreider's among the league leaders in shortest distance each goal travels from stick to red line. So that's interesting, right? Because if he's taking a lot of his shots and scoring a lot of his goals from up close, then you'd expect to have a higher shooting percentage. I remember we once had a conversation with Anzar Khan about, is it Anzar Khan? It is, right?
Ansar or Ansar?
Ansar.
Wait, did we ever...
About the Red Wings.
Prashant Iyer.
Oh, who's Ansar Khan?
He also writes for the Red Wings, but we...
Oh, it was Prashant. Yeah, okay. Prashant. So I'm glad about it. I remember we once... So yeah, you'd expect that if you're taking all of your shots from really up close, and that would be an opportunity to score more goals. Of course, I'm just taking Lewis's... Of course, I'm just taking Lewis's word here that this is true. But I remember when we used to talk to Prashant Iyer about the Red Wings, he brought up that Tyler Bertuzzi had such a high shooting percentage because a lot of his shots were from up close. You'd expect him to have a higher shooting percentage. But all that said, I mean, a 50-goal pace is pretty high, so it makes sense that you don't think he'll be able to keep it up, especially if you're saying 40% shooting percentage on the power play. Of course, even if he falls to a 65-point pace, if most of it is goals, and if you're in a league like a cupful where goals are worth more than assists, then you have to consider that, because that still would probably be like 35, 40-goal pace. So yeah, obviously not nothing, but you're saying he won't be able to keep up what he's doing.
Yeah, looking at Kreider's shot map on the power play, which you can do over at Hockey Viz, which we always credit in the show notes, you can see that Kreider is just parked out front on the power play, taking crazy high percentage shots, right? Lewis, as you mentioned, Elon joked in the chat about how close to the red line Kreider is making all his shot attempts, which is fantastic. But even then, 40% is, I don't think you should be able to convert from 40% at 40% from anywhere on the ice in the NHL. Like, if I wanted to regress generously for Kris Kreider, I'd probably put him at like a 25% power play shooting percentage, even given his shot location. So there's still likely some regression to come. But yeah, that would be consolation for anybody who wants to keep riding Kreider, is that he is in an amazing spot on the ice to take shots, and he seems to know how to make it work.
Okay, yeah, so the cold streak I've got lined up for this 90 to 95% range is Nikolai Ehlers, okay? And he hasn't been terrible. To be honest, this group doesn't really have many cold players, at least when I checked this morning. But Ehlers has been in the COVID protocol, but should be out next week, which is great for him and for the Jets. So I think now's a good time to look at what's been, I guess, overall kind of a disappointing season, at least in terms of points. Ehlers currently sits at 25 points in 33 games. That's a 62-point pace, so well down from his 80-point pace breakout last season, and even down from the 67-point pace he had the year before. The curious thing with Ehlers is that he's actually been shooting the lights out this season. He's pacing for over 4 shots per game when he previously was always around 3 shots per game. So, Brian, is this just a clear situation of an unsustainably low shooting percentage, meaning Ehlers is likely to be closer to his 2020-21 self for the second half of the season, and now's a buy low time just like Elias Lindholm?
No, I don't think so. The problem with Nick Ehlers is the problem that's always existed for him that we've been ruining on this show forever, is that the second power play unit, it's a very hard place to be a point per game player from. Last year, Ehlers beat the odds, pacing for an unlikely 23 power play points, mostly from the second unit, which powered him to that overall 80-point pace last season. This year, Ehlers is pacing for just a very humble 7 or 8 power play points, which is in line with what he's done on the second power play in most of the recent years Ehlers has played there. And the difference between 23 points and 7 points on the power play, that's the entire difference between Ehlers' current 65-point pace and Ehlers' 80-point pace that he had on that year last season when he was amazing from the second unit. So there's no mystery here for me about what's going on with Ehlers. I'm not even digging deep into the shooting percentage, though I will for sure also acknowledge what you noticed about Ehlers' shooting, which is that his shot rates are visibly higher at 5-on-5 as well as on the power play. And to be fair to him, he should have potted at least a couple goals on the 27 power play shots he's taken, but he still has none. So second unit plus more shooting, that could make him a 70-point guy. But I think Ehlers is going to be really hard pressed, even as good as he is, to repeat 80 points without a power play promotion or another bucket of luck from the second power play unit, which is the evergreen line on Nick Ehlers, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I remember there was news at the beginning of the year that's like he apparently likes it on the second power play. Like he asked for that for all the people who are complaining. Like, why doesn't the coach ever give him a chance on the top power play? So it's interesting. I wonder if it'll ever change. Maybe it'll just take injuries. It's funny with Winnipeg, even when people get injured, someone else always takes over on that top power play. All right, let's go to the 85 to 90% rostered band on Yahoo. The hot streak I want to bring up is a guy who's rostered in 86% of leagues. I don't understand how it's not 100. It's Jason Robertson. He's actually currently day-to-day with a lower body injury. And for anyone interested, in case this lasts, Yoel Kiviranta took Robertson's place on that really hot Pavelski and Hintz line versus Tampa on Saturday. Then someone named Riley Damiani took a spot on the top power play that Robertson usually occupies. So if you're interested in a really deep cut, you can look at Kiviranta or Damiani. Again, obviously check to see because Robertson's day-to-day. Maybe he'll be back soon. But anyways, before he got hurt, he was on a roll. 12 points in his last 9 games. On the season now, Robertson sits at 32 points in 28 games. That's a 94 full season point pace. That's incredible. Brian, is this for real? We know Jason Robertson is good. He was a great rookie last year. He would have won the Calder if Kaprizov wasn't in the picture. Are we looking at another reasonable second round pick in fantasy drafts next season? I've brought up some other players too. I think it was Jack Hughes most recently. I was like, is this guy now fallen into the echelon of players that now we have to consider among the, Gensels, Svechnikovs? It seems like if Jason Robertson can keep up what he's doing, he becomes a really important fantasy asset to your team and someone that people are going to have to reach for next year.
Yeah, I'm bought in on Jason Robertson. And it's a small leap of faith, even if it doesn't seem like I'm sticking my neck out much. It doesn't feel like I am. But for anyone who's like, there's not enough here, I know. And I still am buying in on Jason Robertson because he's scoring more goals. I'm still buying in on Jason Robertson. Naysayers might say that Jason Robertson is scoring more goals than would be expected, given his shot selection, like his actual goals scored is outpacing his expected goals scored. But that is what elite shooters can often be found doing. And I think Jason Robertson is making a play to be considered amongst the most dangerous shooters in the league. This guy scores goals. Go back to Robertson's junior scouting reports. You'll see it all over about his threatening release and quick shot. And it's true. We don't have a big enough sample on Jason Robertson yet to fully anoint him logically and mathematically as being a legitimate shooting threat and to keep up what he's been doing. In 82 games, 82 career games for Jason Robertson, doesn't it feel like he's been around longer just because of how many goals he's scored? But in 82 games, he's only played 82 games. That's a small sample. He's only taken 205 shots. In that sample, he has a 15% shooting percentage. Again, that's not enough of a sample. Usually we want about 3 seasons worth of play, maybe 600 or 700 shots to be able to buy in on a player with a high degree of certainty. But I'm giving a pass to Jason Robertson based on what I've seen. I assume he's just going to keep doing what he's been doing for the first 82 games of his career. If you're wondering where he's going to go in your drafts next year, second rounder, I don't think his name value is there yet, that you're going to have to get him in the second round, but could be worth it. Certainly worth a third or fourth round pick. And I could see Jason Robertson eventually entering that Kyle Connor, Jake Gensel kind of level, even sooner rather than later, and being drafted around where they get drafted in your fantasy drafts. I'm curious to see where Dallas goes in the future, because they're sort of building around Robertson and Hintz, and like is their future, and leaving guys like Sagan, who we'll talk about a little later, in the past. And I don't know what that means for how competitive the team will be, but it doesn't matter so long as Robertson and Hintz are going together. I'm a huge fan of Jason Robertson, and I think he can keep this up.
Okay, when you were saying, just out of curiosity, when you were saying that, like, usually we'd want like 3 years of data to like buy in, you're saying like specifically to buy in on someone with a high shooting percentage? Like, it's like there's basic shooting percentages that you could assume someone will be able to keep up, but when you see someone shooting at a high rate, it's more rare, but there's some players who are capable of doing it, but you want to see a little more to make sure it's not just an anomaly. That's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, sure. That's part of it. I mean, I want to see for any player to establish their own baseline. I want to see them play for a while, but you're right. Robertson's shooting percentage is above average. And when it's above average, yeah, you assume it's going to regress to the mean unless you have reason to believe otherwise, which could be a really huge sample, or it could just be what I'm saying right now about Jason Robertson, that I think he's for real. So yeah, that's a good point. His shooting percentage is higher than average, and not every shooter can keep it there, but I am banking on Robertson being one of those guys who can.
Yeah, man, what a steal for Dallas. They got him in the second round, I think, of 2017, 39th overall. It's looking like maybe one of the best picks of that draft now. Okay, so let's next go to the cold streak in this band. It's a guy who played today, and I wrote this before today's game, as you may notice. It's Elias Pettersson, 87% rostered. I'll tell you what I wrote before today's game, and it's that it's sad to see him, first of all, falling below 90%. I definitely didn't expect that going into the year, but it's completely warranted because EP40 has gone pointless in his last 4 games going into today. Just one shot in 3 of those 4 games and 2 in the other. So it had been a very cold stretch for Pettersson. We were having a lot of questions on our Discord about the guy. Missing Mac started a thread asking about Pettersson versus Kadri for the rest of the season. The response was overwhelmingly just go for Kadri. But of course, then let's look at what happened today. Vancouver played Washington. Like I said, I was in this matchup in the cupful against Kyle, and I was up by a decent amount. I just needed his Pettersson and Quinn Hughes to not go too nuts. And then lo and behold, the game started in the second period. Elias Pettersson scored 2 quick goals, making me very nervous about my matchup and about this segment on the show, because now I guess technically he's not really on a cold streak anymore, but also it's just one game against the Capitals and it was a back-to-back, so who knows. Brian, what were you thinking about Elias Pettersson moving forward? Because it's been a very disappointing year, but at the same time, I don't know. There's a new coach, and he had a good game today. I don't know how much to read into that. You know, a couple years ago, I got my CTO of my company to go pick up an Elias Pettersson Young Guns hockey card for me in Guelph, and then he told me afterwards that the guy who he had to meet up with, that I had found on Kijiji, told him to meet by this dumpster, and was super sketchy. And I was like, don't worry, it's worth it. Elias Pettersson's awesome. This card's gonna be worth a lot of money. And now I was starting to think, oh man, I maybe risked Paul's life for a player who's cold and maybe not even going to be worth it. So these 2 goals today at least help with that value, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, we both sort of did our research before the show started, and Elon, if you don't want that,
you said we did our research before the show started.
Oh, sorry. I'll just start over. We were saying hopefully the card value rebounds. Okay. Elon, if you're impatient, I'm going to take that Young Guns card. I'm happy to take it off your hands. If you don't want it, I will meet you at a dumpster in Guelph. Even I'll meet your CTO. I'll meet anyone at a dumpster in Guelph to go pick that up. I mean, it's been a bad year for Pettersson, not the kind you can fully describe with numbers either. We've talked on the show this season about, the contract situation leading into the year, and maybe that was a distraction or off-putting. The whole team has been in turmoil in Vancouver, and right now Pettersson has to get through what might be the worst stretch of hockey he's played in his life. How often do you think Elias Pettersson has felt like this much of a failure as a hockey player? Probably never. That's a lot to work through. And so my hunch when I was researching the show, before I knew about the Vancouver Washington result from today, my hunch was that the Olympic break would be a really good time for Pettersson to reset. And maybe he doesn't even need to wait that long. I mean, I'm not going to go full out on saying Pettersson's back yet, but I still think Pettersson is the player we thought he was. We're just going to have to wait to see how long it takes for him to become it again. I think it's great that Bruce Boudreau's in the picture. I think he might be a good guy to have around helping Pettersson get right. I was reading some quotes about what Boudreau was saying about and to Elias Pettersson. That seemed very encouraging. Pettersson's young. What is he, 21 years old? He's still newish to the league. He has a lot to learn. And I think this is just it's going to take some time to get back to where he was before this, but I have no doubt that he's going to get back there. So if you're trying to figure out for fantasy purposes what to do with Pettersson, again, I would be looking at the Olympic break as a time for him to like have a mini off season and come back fresh in, towards the end of February. And that's what I would sort of be looking for. If you're looking to buy low, do it at your own risk, but I wouldn't be shy if you needed to take a swing.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, if you have him and you've been struggling with him and now he just had this good game, maybe now's a good time to try to sell. Maybe you could get that Kadri. Probably not. Kadri's been so insanely good, but you have to figure it out. So, is this like a David Pastrnak from a couple weeks ago kind of call where you're saying like no doubt about it, or you're saying like you just have faith in him, but it's like for sure not a guarantee?
No, it's the second one. I think there's still some doubt. Like, I don't think there's any doubt again that Pettersson is going to be the player we thought he would be coming into the season. I just don't know if that's going to happen this season or if we're going to have to wait for the next season for him to get back up to full speed. Pastrnak was like, it's all going to happen. Don't worry. Pettersson, it's going to happen. I don't know how much time it's going to take because there's really are a lot of intangibles here.
Yeah. Plus, it's always nice that, Pettersson, while he plays on a bit of a dumpster fire team, at least sometimes, I guess not today, they had the win, but yeah, Boston's a really good spot. So you assume that it's going to be easier for someone like Pastrnak to be able to bounce back while Vancouver's like shifting around the lines, trying to find something that works. Okay, let's go next to the 80 to 85% rostered band. We're burning through this. We're already 20% down. Or no, we're 15% down. Now we'll be 20% down. Sam Bennett, okay? He's the hot streak I want to bring up. He's only 85% rostered. And he's been living up, I think, to all the hype going into the season, especially lately. Like, everyone was, like, really excited about Bennett, obviously, after he got traded to the Panthers and was so great at the end of last season. And this Panthers team that has scored 21 goals over their last 3 games, just wiping the floor with their competition. Bennett's been in on quite a lot of it. He's been centering the second line with Huberdeau and Duclair on the wings. And Bennett's also been playing on the top power play. And he had 4 goals and 2 assists over these last couple of games. That brings him to 9 points in his last 5 games. He's actually only pacing for 65 points on this season. So he did have that cold stretch earlier on, which would have been a really good time to maybe try to buy him, because right now that 65-point pace is climbing quickly. And that's along with his huge peripheral contributions, right? Both shots on goals and hits are really great for Sam Bennett and give him that extra value in multi-category leagues. Brian, this is my hunch. My hunch is that Sam Bennett will keep going like up rest of season. I don't think he's going to be staying at the 65-point pace. I think he's going to be crossing the 70-point pace, maybe even get to 75. I guess I'd have to do the math, like how good he'd have to do to get to an overall 75-point pace. But I just feel like, how can you not, if you're like playing on a line with Jonathan Huberdeau and, and with Florida just being as insanely good as they are, it's really hard to not imagine Bennett being able to keep up this recent production to some effect. Anyways, I'm curious to know, Brian, what pace are you expecting rest of season for Sam Bennett? Is this recent run at least somewhat sustainable to you?
Yes, it is. Like the whole picture is sustainable for Sam Bennett. By the way, shout out to Anthony Duclair, who is shooting 20%, which means I think there are extra assists for Huberdeau and Bennett to get in on, although Bennett has just 8 assists to go with his 15 goals. So I actually see room to grow there. And if you look at Bennett's points participation rates, he's at just 47% at 5-on-5. You could probably count on him being involved in about 20 to 25% more of the goals being scored while he's on the ice. So you have that to help Bennett out and put more wind in Bennett's sails for what he's doing now. And I don't see any reason to disbelieve what Sam Bennett is doing. And I think that there is his ticket to 70 points. I'm going to buy in on that, no problem. I could even see Bennett heading up towards a 75-point pace, and I'm really just not sure you can put a ceiling on Sam Bennett, since we're essentially watching this former 4th overall pick be reborn in a role perfectly suited to him when he is in the prime of his career, right? He's about 25 years old. By the way, fact check, thanks to Shane in the chat for checking me for saying Pettersson is 21. Pettersson is 23, but Bennett is 25, and he's got a lot of good hockey ahead of him. if he gets to stay where he is, and I don't see why he wouldn't. So yeah, I'm really excited about what we're seeing from Sam Bennett. And like I said, I'm not disbelieving it one bit.
Okay, yeah, I remember when we did our Tier 1 auction live draft show, and John Newhold had drafted Sam Bennett, and then he was going on about how excited he was about him, and I was like kind of annoyed because I wanted Sam Bennett, but I got outbid, and then like the next bid, I got Ryan O'Reilly, and then I was being like, a little petulant, like, well, why aren't you talking about how great my Ryan O'Reilly pick is? And then like now I'm thinking like, man, no, I really blew it. I really should have saved some money to get Sam Bennett. I would, John, if you're listening, if you want to trade O'Reilly for Bennett, I'll accept that, and I'll even throw in a sweetener for you. Okay, so the cold streak for this 80 to 85% range, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, but I think it's okay because I'm going to go to someone a little higher. I'm going to go to 86% just because, I had to use Pettersson in that range, but I have another player on a cold streak right around here, and that's Neil Pionk, who's 86% rostered on Yahoo. What's going on with him over Winnipeg? We already talked about Ehlers, but I have another player, at least one that's on the top power play, but, equally cold lately. He's been a solid 50-ish point defenseman since joining the Jets and started this season even hotter than that. He had 16 points in his first 24 games, which would have continued on to be a 55-point pace, but it didn't continue on. Lately, he's gone cold. Only 1 point in his last 7 games. Brian, do you see any reason under the hood for Pionk managers to be worried? Or I guess I will say the positive that to preempt your answer, I'll say the positive to me is potentially Blenwis. Oh, I don't know, have we ever said Blenwis out loud, or is that just our private name for them?
I think this is our private name.
Okay, now it's public.
Who are you talking about?
Ben and Lewis from Short Shifts said recently on a show, they were talking about how the Jets are about to get healthy. They were talking about Dubois and saying that they expect him to bounce back a little bit. Wheeler's even starting to skate, so they're going to be at full strength soon. So that's got to be good for Pionk. Is that enough reason to think that he can get back going like he did at the start of the year?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I'm not concerned about Pionk, even without any of that extra context. He's still shooting, he's still playing minutes, still on the top power play unit. I'm not seeing any reason to be worried at all about Pionk. And I say that as someone who rosters him in the Cupful, KKU PFL, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. So I'm experiencing Pionk's production outage firsthand. He's just cold. All right. There's no reason I can see to think he's not going to be okay. So this is just a hang in there kind of moment.
Okay, so we've still got 75% to 80%, and then all the other bands, which is quite a few of them. I guess we're 20% on the show now if we want to keep the math going. We're going to get to all of that, so that's 100 players left to discuss. We'll get to them in just a sec. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. All right, we are back, and we've got no more ad breaks for the rest of the show, Brian. So let's go to this 75% to 80% range on Yahoo. The hot streak I want to talk about here is Matt Duchene, 79% rostered. I feel like all of these hot streaks, I'm just going to be like, why aren't these people rostered in more leagues? But Duchene for sure, right? Maybe some people wondered if, he started this season so hot. It's this after being such a nobody for the last couple of years, he was just going off, and then he had this upper body injury, and maybe you would have thought, oh, that's probably going to derail it. He was just running hot, and there's no way he'll be able to keep that up now that he's, has to sit back and watch games, lose whatever mojo he had. But that hasn't been the case. Anyways, he's returned, and he's put up 9 points in his last 8 games, bringing him now to 34 points in 35 games on this season. Brian, do you think this point per game pace for Matt Duchene is looking sustainable for the rest of the season? I think it's, I'll just leave it at that. Is the point pace looking sustainable to you for the rest of the season?
Well, first off, happy birthday, Matt Duchene. The day of recording, January 16th, is his birthday. So way to go, Matt Duchene. What a happy birthday for him too. And anybody who's rostering Matt Duchene in fantasy. The funny thing, well, it's not funny. It's not even surprising actually about Matt Duchene is that he's producing at 5-on-5 exactly at the same rate as he did in his first year as a Nashville Predator, when he was not very impressive on the whole. But there's 2 differences between this current year and that other year where he was producing the same at 5-on-5. The first is that Duchene is seeing more time at 5-on-5. So he's seeing another 90 seconds a night at 5-on-5, which means if he's producing points at the same rate per 60 minutes, well, there's more minutes. So he's producing more points. The second difference is that Matt Duchene is on a power play in Nashville that is clicking at 27% versus what was a broken Nashville power play, converting on just 17% of their chances. And oh yeah, Duchene is also on a top power play unit instead of seeing just a 50% share of the team's power play minutes. And now Duchene is also scoring on nearly 30% of his power play shots. That's helped bring Duchene to 8 power play goals, which is just 2 shy of his career high, which he set as a rookie in 81 games back in 2008, 2009. Matt Duchene's been around a long time. And as a team, Nashville is scoring on 20% of their power play shots with Duchene on the ice. So those percentages may not hold. And that's why maybe Duchene isn't a point per game. And that's why maybe Matt Duchene is not a point per game guy, but he's not far from a point per game. And it's crazy for Duchene to be talked about at this point in the show. Like, he should be rostered in every format. I know it takes a while to shake the sting off the name of a guy who's been such a letdown for so long, but Duchene has earned your respect and his legit fantasy relevance.
Okay, way to go, Matt. Happy birthday. Now a cold streak in the same rostered band. Unlike Duchene, Patrik Laine has not been able to keep up with what he was doing to start the season since coming back from his injury. Laine now at 76% rostered. He did have that big 1-goal, 7-shot game back on December 30th, his first game since returning. But since then, only 1 goal and 1 assist in his most recent 7 games. Lewis on the latest short shifts called out Gustav Nyquist as someone who's producing on Columbus and might be someone good to look at because he's not rostered in many leagues. Imagine how frustrating it must be to have Patrik Laine and just be looking in free agency and seeing Gustav Nyquist getting all of these points. Lewis was spot on. Nyquist had another 1 goal, 1 assist game versus Florida on Saturday, while Laine did nothing. Nyquist 9 points in his last 7. So Brian, what do you do at this point if you have Patrik Laine? To me, he's really giving off vibes of not being reliable. Like, it's been many seasons now where, you know, he goes on these hot stretches and then he disappears. We remember that famous year in Winnipeg where he like had 1 month where he like broke the record for goals in a month, and then after that just did nothing the rest of the year. I'd be worried about Patrik Laine right now. Do you have any reason? Do you have any silver linings here? Any just unsustainable numbers? Or should the Patrik Laine managers be as nervous as I would be if I had him?
You should be nervous if you have Patrik Laine, which is part and parcel of having Patrik Laine, right? Like you mentioned, he's inconsistent or has been inconsistent lately. That is who he's been over the course of really the majority of his career at this point. Patrik Laine also has just 13 shots over the 7-game stretch you've mentioned, Elon. So fewer than 2 shots per game. That's not a way for a scorer to make his mark on your fantasy team. Laine is most effective when he's shooting somewhere around 3 shots per game, which he was closer to doing earlier this year. But one reason Laine is not doing that right now, well, just look at his time on ice. In Laine's first 14 games, he played fewer than 17 minutes just one time. But Laine has played fewer than 17 minutes in each of his last 3 games, including just 15 minutes and 10 seconds on Saturday night against Florida. Now, maybe that was part of the blowout effect, like Bjorkstrand had low minutes then too. But it's really frustrating to see Laine not be a guy that gets regular, consistent deployment. And it is sadly characteristic of how we've seen things go with Patrik Laine over his career. You know, we have to be worried again that Laine's in the doghouse and he hasn't had historical success at working his way out of the doghouse. His shot rates at 5-on-5 aren't where I'd like to see them. So even accounting for less ice time, he's still not shooting as much as I'd want Patrik Laine to shoot. And another frustration is that in 15 games, Patrik Laine has just 14 shots on the power play and no goals. So yeah, this is all disappointing. But somehow, after all of that sadness, Patrik Laine is still pacing for 63 points, so not all is lost, but maybe he's a, more of an under 60 than over 60 player, and there's no sign of breakout imminent from Patrik Laine, aside from what we all know is there, that game-changing goal scorer lurking somewhere in him, but it is only lurking for the time being.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to you're not seeing anything good in his recent numbers, and obviously this ice time is super concerning. I guess we were saying Elias Pettersson is like concerning with his numbers, but you just had this like underlying faith that like, no, he's Elias Pettersson, he'll be able to get through this, and clearly you don't have this about Patrik Laine.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes you have to just play with your gut, right? We don't know obviously what's going to happen, but I'm with you here on these two guys. Let's go now to the 70 to 75% rostered band, and we have a player 73% rostered. That is a point per game player on the season. So I don't know who these people are in these leagues where a player that's a point per game isn't worth rostering. But man, Tyler Bertuzzi is hot, hot, hot. He had a goal and 2 assists versus Buffalo on Saturday, bringing him to 13 points in his last 10 games and bringing him now to 31 points in 31 games on the season. Brian, this seems to be the breakout year that Tyler Bertuzzi, he hinted at last year, right? He had a really good start, but then he ended up missing the rest of the season with an injury. He came back this year. We were a little concerned at the start, start, but he wasn't going to get vaccinated. And I was thinking, like, oh man, like now is he a bust? But anyways, anyone who just decided to whatever draft him anyways is very happy with what they've gotten so far. Do you think that this stretch is sustainable? Maybe not point per game, but like 70 plus points, like much higher than we would have expected going into the year.
Well, a month ago, Elon, I think we'd be asking a very different question if you were doing this rostered ban hot cold thing. A month ago, Bertuzzi would be in the cold category. He had just 3 points, all assists in 11 games 1 month ago, but now he's changed the conversation because Bertuzzi has exploded for 9 goals in his last 10 games on 27 shots. That brings Bertuzzi to 18 goals in 31 games. He's tied for 13th in the NHL in goals scored. He has a 33% shooting percentage in this streak, 22% on the season. That's probably too high. I mean, his games played is not much higher than Jason Robertson's. Actually, I actually don't know. His games played is not that much different than the number of games that Jason Robertson has played, but I'm pretty comfortable saying that Tyler Bertuzzi is not going to keep shooting 22% this year or in general. Like, it's too high. So for that reason, I don't expect the goal scoring to keep up from... I don't expect the goal scoring to keep up from Tyler Bertuzzi. So I wouldn't have him point per game. I think it's hard to take him lower than 70 points, which still kind of surprises me, Elon. Like, when you think Tyler Bertuzzi, do you think 70-point player?
I mean, I think you have to now. Like, I think you can't only think about Tyler Bertuzzi in a vacuum, right? Like, he's playing with Lucas Raymond, who's showing himself to be a huge superstar. He's now got Seider quarterbacking the power play where he's making bank, right? Because he just sits in front of the net just like Kris Kreider. We already talked about Bertuzzi, how he is the type of player that is known to have a higher shooting percentage because he's also taking a lot of shots from the front of the net. So, yeah, it's like he's on the top line. He's on the top power play. Playing with, like, Larkin and Raymond is, like, 2 pretty amazing players to be playing with. So I don't see why he shouldn't be able to be a 70-point player. Like, I get that shooting percentage is a little high, but yeah, I agree with you. Like, I don't think he's like point per game, but I also don't think I'd take him lower than 70.
So yeah, I think that's, oh, sorry. Okay, so yeah, we're agreed. We can't see him being a point per game player, but we also can't look away from all the amazing production he's given. So way to go, Tyler Bertuzzi. I'm sure you were able to draft him for less than the 70-point player would normally go for.
You know what, though? I am actually getting notified in the chat here. Shams is letting us know that the lines changed recently in Detroit. In the last game, Bertuzzi was playing on a line with Fabry and Pius Suter, and it was Vladislav Nemesnikov playing with Larkin and Raymond, so I guess it worked. They shut out the Sabres. Bertuzzi's still on the top power play. But anyways, who knows? Like, hard to speculate. He's been really good. Maybe if he stays on that second line all season, that wouldn't be the best for him, but then also if it wasn't going well, maybe then the team would change him back. So something to watch. Maybe also watch Nemesnikov if you want a really deep ad. We weren't planning on bringing up Nemesnikov on the show, but obviously I just said how good of a spot it would be to play with Larkin and Raymond, right? Okay, so the cold streak I want to bring up in the 70 to 75% band is John Klingberg, 72% rostered. He had a good start to the year, but he's pointless in his last 4 games, and he's one of these players where when he's cold, he's like super cold in your multi-category leagues because he doesn't have many peripherals to make up for the fact that he's not getting any points. Some defenseman leagues give you some hits and blocks. Not Klingy. Apparently, he's also on the trade block. That's the recent rumor. So, Brian, if you have John Klingberg, you're frustrated that he's cold. Are you like hoping that he gets traded? Or are you like hoping he doesn't get traded because top power play on Dallas should be a pretty sweet spot to be in, and this is maybe just a blip?
I guess he's also like one of this old guard that I was talking about when we were talking about Jason Robertson. I'll say similar to Tyler Bertuzzi, this is all about timing. We didn't mention Klingberg when he was hot. It's too bad we didn't mention him then because we've mentioned Klingberg several times this year when he's been cold. And honestly, as you mentioned, with no peripherals to go by when Klingberg's not scoring, he's just kind of a ho-hum fantasy player. I think where Klingberg is losing his points is on the power play, where he's only pacing for 19 power play points, which isn't bad. But Klingberg's 5-on-5 production has never been great, and it's still the case this year that Klingberg is not doing well at 5-on-5. The years Klingberg has been really good. He's paced for like 25, 30 power play points. That's not happening this year. And his ice time is down a bit too. There's a very thin line somehow between 55 and 45 point Klingberg. And that's unfortunate. He's a tough guy to have that way. No peripherals to help you in the meantime. And earlier in the season, I preached patience for Klingberg, but he continues to not be able to convert on the power play. And now with his ice time dwindling, although he's still on the top unit, I am growing a little concerned and a little less interested in holding this guy all season at all costs.
So you're hoping then that he gets traded? Like I'm curious because that's probably people might be thinking. I know you're the type of person that you don't necessarily like to think about the future, but it's like apparently this is the hot goss, Brian. I'm just trying to share it here that everyone's talking about how Klingberg's on the trade block and he might be moved imminently. So is it like I'm just curious if you have him, even if you're a little concerned and you brought up reasons to be concerned, do you hold because you hope he gets traded? I just feel like he's already in a good spot. You know, like he would have to land in a better spot.
I agree. He's quarterbacking a top power play unit on a team that has pretty solid offense. And so I'm not getting so excited. Maybe there's a team where things work better for John Klingberg, but I think it's more likely that he's just going to be about the same player as he has been in Dallas, which is like it's great when he can hit that 55-point mark, but when he's not doing it, he's a really painful guy to hold on to.
Yeah, I heard a rumor about Carolina, I believe, which would be interesting, right? Because then does he bump Tony DeAngelo? But obviously, we'll talk about that if and when it happens. Okay, let's go to the 65 to 70% rostered band. If I already surprised you by saying that there was a point per game player in the 70 to 75% range, then it should be even more surprising that we also have one here 5% lower at 66% rostered, Anthony Duclair. Of course, we're going to have to cover a lot of Panthers on this episode, and we've already talked about Bennett and Huberdeau, so let's finish off that line with Duclair. 2 goals and 3 assists in these last couple of games. That brings him to 30 points in 30 games on the season. Just what a year for him. The Ottawa Senators, could have had him for cheap, gave him away for nothing, and now I guess, I don't know, I'd imagine that they probably are regretting it. But yeah, Brian, so Tyler Bertuzzi point per game, Anthony Duclair point per game. Which player do you expect to keep it up or be more likely to keep it up rest of the way?
Sorry, between who did you say?
Duclair and Bertuzzi.
Okay. I think Bertuzzi, and I've already tipped my hand to this, I think Bertuzzi's run is more sustainable. Duclair, I mentioned earlier, shooting 20% at 5-on-5. Duclair has 16 goals, coming from 25% shooting in all situations. Amazing stat line, by the way, 16 goals and 14 assists for 30 points. But usually if a player like Duclair is suddenly scoring a whole lot more goals, you're like, oh, is he seeing more shots? No, Duclair is not taking more shots. Is he seeing more ice time? No, Duclair is not seeing more ice time. Duclair is just a guy on a heater. And that's great. That's amazing. Way to go, Anthony Duclair, for doing that. Also, Duclair's line, they're scoring nearly 5.5 goals per hour at 5-on-5. And I know if you're not looking at these numbers all the time, that might not mean much to you. 2.5 goals per 60 is like average for like a second line. 3 goals per 60 minutes is good. 3.5 goals per 60 minutes is like a powerful line. 5.5 goals per 60 minutes is just wild. I love to see the success. I love to see the success that line is having. I love to see Duclair doing as well as he is. But on 65 shots, Duclair has 16 goals. And it's much more likely, if you were to simulate this 10,000 times, that Duclair would have 8 goals more often, much more often, than he'd have 16 goals on 65 shots, which means that I would take Duclair down to like a 60-point pace. If he wasn't on this magical, crazy, amazing line, I think maybe I could bump him up to a 65-point pace the rest of the season, but I don't see the goal scoring holding the rest of the season.
Yeah, plus Bertuzzi's on the top power play and Duclair isn't, though I guess you could also say that Duclair is playing with much better players. So I think I'll agree with you, though. I'll take Bertuzzi higher, but I got Duclair actually as a free agent in both of my serious Yahoo leagues. So he's been one of the FA ads of the year for me and anyone who got him.
Unfortunately, I did the same. I had Duclair and I dropped him because there was a week where he had a bad schedule. He wouldn't have fit into my lineup, and I've been kicking myself ever since.
Oh, you know what? I've actually had a new idea about fantasy that I've been trying out lately. I've been like less focusing on this schedule, just a little bit. Like I still do it a lot, but like for stream, like for example, next week there's a bunch of teams. We're gonna get to them later on in the show. There's a few teams that play Monday, Tuesday. So like the inclination has always been grab a guy from LA or Montreal, someone that's playing 2 games. But I've started to think like maybe you let everyone else rush and fall over themselves to grab those guys and just try to take the best player available, even if they're only playing 1 game. It depends obviously how bad that Duclair schedule was for you, but I feel like it's worked out for me more often when I've just gone with the player I liked. Like Like I remember Jesper Bratt was someone who I added even though he wasn't going to give me extra games the following week. It was like, my last move on a Sunday, right when his hot streak had started. And, I just thought, I just want Bratt because I think he's really good. And now obviously I'm happy I did that and didn't take whatever streamer that would have given me 2 extra games that week.
It's good advice. Like you can't make the schedule the be all end all. Just to be clear, for me, I was not making the schedule be all end all. I was looking at Duclair having scored on a crazy percentage of the shots he had just taken. And also at that point, he wasn't solidified in the top 6 either. So, seeing an unsustainable Duclair, maybe getting bumped from deployment and with a bad schedule, that was 3 strikes for him. But he stayed where he has been, the schedule, whatever. And he's sustained the unsustainable. So I lost on that one. I blew it. I feel sad.
I mean, I didn't mean to make that a dig. Like, I didn't mean to say like, oh, don't be like Brian. I would probably maybe also have done that. It's just like an idea to throw out there because I know like the stream scheme that Dave releases and it's a really useful show and streaming is important to get those extra games. But yeah, you always have to still keep in mind that maybe some players are above streamer territory in both the add and drop situation. Okay, so the cold streak for the 65 to 70% range, a player who is 1% more rostered than Anthony Duclair, which makes no sense to me, finally dropped in Couple Tier 1 a couple days ago. He was rostered all season, but now he is available for me, and I'm going to tell you, Brian, I have no interest in Tyler Sagan. So we're going back to Dallas quickly. He is pointless in 5 games. Couldn't even get on top power play when Robertson was injured. Like I told you, I even forget the name of the guy who, Damiani or something, got the spot ahead of Tyler Sagan. So this guy's a total snoozer. Like, I assume that this cold streak is sustainable. I'm sure you're going to say it's because of the deployment and free Tyler Sagan or something, but I don't care. Either way, it's like this guy's useless to me unless he's, something significant changes in his deployment. If he gets traded, obviously, then we could reassess.
Exactly. We've definitely established that Tyler Sagan is a snoozer. He's snoozed until further notice. He is actually occupying the space that Matt Duchene used to as being someone who we believed in long enough and he didn't deliver, that he's just forgotten now. And now Sagan's name is tarnished. It's going to take time to rebuild trust. And to be honest, it's not just that he's not doing well. Like every offensive indicator is in a continuing pattern of decline over the last few years for Tyler Sagan, who turns 30 in a couple weeks. So this is technically his age 30 season because he's 29 now, but he'll be 30 by February 1st, which is what I use. And he's got 5 more years on his contract with a no movement clause at $10 million a season. I can't imagine Sagan or Dallas is happy with the situation. And I think he's part of the old guard there from a group that never got over the hump to regularly and seriously contend in Dallas. I would love, like you're talking about Klingberg, would I be excited if Klingberg got traded? No. But if Sagan was traded somehow, I would love that.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe if he gets traded, I'll add him out of free agency, but he's definitely not someone I'm hoping that'll happen. Yeah. But the question is is he actually still really good? And he's just like the old guard and maybe not. Right. So I wouldn't be falling over myself to grab him if he was traded even. I
mean, Dallas might just be the wrong place for him.
Sure.
He things just aren't going well there. I'm not the pattern of decline we're seeing from him. It's too soon. I would have expected to see this in 3 to 5 years. And maybe there's been some injuries that have hampered his ability to be as good as he's been. But to me, he doesn't look like a player who should be declining because of age the way he is right now. So I would like to see him get a fresh start on a team that's willing to use him a little differently, give him a different assignment. And I have some level of confidence that his numbers would perk up. If he was traded tomorrow, I might go grab him out of free agency.
Hey, imagine if the Bruins try to get him back now to fix a big mistake that they made all those years ago. Let's say Craig Smith for Tyler Sagan. Sagan jumps up with Marchand and Bergeron. Yeah, then I'd be interested in taking Tyler Sagan. Okay, so let's go to the 60 to 65% band. And the hot player I'm going to bring up is a guy I just had to because I brought him up last week. And now I want to see if you've updated your opinion. And that's Cam Atkinson. Last week we talked about him. You kind of, I'll summarize, but then you can correct me if I'm saying it wrong. I feel like what you basically said was, yeah, he's hot, but he's never really done this before, and aside from that 1 year with Panarin, and now he's not playing with Panarin, so you just didn't expect that he'd be able to keep it up. So for what it's worth, another 2 games now, another 2 points, 4 shots in each of those games last week versus the Rangers in Boston. You know me, Brian, I'm just a sucker for shots. And I'm looking at Cam Atkinson. He's got now 3 goals, 5 assists, and 29 shots over his last 6 games. He's shooting the lights out. Plus, he's on the top line and the top power play. He's getting all the primo deployment, like over 20 minutes a game. So I don't know. To me, it seems like this guy is like for real and not someone I'd be too concerned about. But, you know, once again, feel free to just be like, Elon, listen back to the last show. My opinion hasn't changed.
It really hasn't. Like, it's really nice that Atkinson has continued the run, but I went to look at his game by game fancy stats, quote unquote. He's been on the ice for 8 goals during the stretch you're talking about, Elon. He has participated on all 8 of those goals. So he has 8 points on the 8 on-ice goals scored. That's 100% points participation. That's about 30% more than we'd expect to see from Cam Atkinson. And also, those 8 goals, that's a lot of goals for Atkinson to have been on the ice for, because the Flyers are shooting at a 14% conversion rate while Atkinson is on the ice. So the Flyers are scoring more than they should normally when Atkinson's on the ice, and Atkinson is getting in on more of those goals than he should normally. So good job. Great stuff, Cam Atkinson. But these are indicators like flashing. These are not numbers we ever see sustain. We never see a team sustain a 14% on ice shooting percentage or a player sustain a 100% points participation rate for very long. Keep in mind, like, I know you're super excited and you're saying, how about the last 2 games? Atkinson has 2 more points. Before this run, Cam Atkinson had 13 points in 31 games. Now he's on a 60-point pace total, and I think it's a successful season for Cam Atkinson if he can maintain that 60-point pace the rest of the season, which is cool. I feel like the way we're framing this, I feel like I've been pushed into a position where I have to say, like, oh man, forget Cam Atkinson. Like, I'm going to be looked at as a guy who doesn't like Cam Atkinson. I've always tried to boost Cam Atkinson when I see good things happening. And this is really exciting, Elon. But when you asked me last week, is this a return to that one thing he did one time with one of the world's greatest hockey players? No, I still don't think it is. But ask me again next week when he has 2 more points in 2 more games.
Yeah, well, I guess I might have to if that happens. Especially if he takes all those shots. And yeah, you're saying that, over these 8 goals, he's been on the ice for 100% of them. So that's probably not going to sustain.
No, he's gotten a point on 100% of them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. His IPP is 100%. So yeah, bring him down to only 6 points in those 6 games. And maybe that's more reasonable. That's still point per game, right? So he has room to fall.
Yeah, but there shouldn't have been 8 goals scored. Maybe there should have only been 6 goals scored.
All right, so 5 goals in his last 6 games is a pace that we can expect moving forward. Okay, anyways, I'm just saying that I like the shots, okay? Like, even when he was playing with Panarin, I don't think he was shooting like this.
I like the shots too. We can agree on that.
Shots. Okay, let's have shots after the show. So let's go to the cold streak now in this range of 60 to 65%. And this is a guy at 63% rostered in Sam Girard on Colorado. Colorado scored 9 goals over their last couple of games. They're kind of like the Panthers. Well, the Panthers only need 1 game to score 9 goals, but still, Colorado's scoring a lot. And in those last couple of games where Colorado scored 9 goals, 0 points for Sam Girard, even though he plays big minutes. So super disappointing. I always hate that, right? When I'm rostering a player, and like if I'm not watching the game live and I look afterwards and see, oh man, the team scored 9. I can't wait to see how many points Girard got. A big old goose egg. Only 2 goals and 8 assists in his last 23 games now. He's also like Klingberg, like not a big periffs guy, so he's not helping you when he's not getting points. So Brian, do you have any explanation for him being 63% rostered on Yahoo? Like, I feel like if he was dropped in my tier 1 couple division, I don't think I'd be making a claim on him.
Just name value, I think, to think that you have the top pairing defenseman or someone who eats a lot of minutes in Colorado and Sam Girard. That seems appealing because they score a lot of goals. And yeah, the Colorado defense takes turns picking up points on all the goals Colorado scores. Elon, I also wonder, because Cale Makar was injured earlier in the season when I think more managers were active. And so everybody rushed to go add Sam Girard. And I wonder if his number's still a little inflated because people were active then and not active by the time Makar was back and Girard cooled off. But anyway, like I said, it's great to be a defenseman on Colorado. Eric Johnson had a turn recently, picking up a bunch of points. Bowen Byram's done it. Sam Girard has done it, and I'm sure he'll do it again sometime. But I don't think, I'm with you, Elon. I don't think Sam Girard is a must-hold when nothing's doing for him.
Right. So this cold streak, pretty sustainable, unfortunately. But obviously a valuable real-life player, but just not someone you could expect a ton of points from. Last year, he had that really good run for a long time. But
yeah, and he can have another really good run, too. I'm not, it's hard. I don't want to say this is not a cold streak because it's what we expect from Sam Girard. I expect more than 2 points every 5 games from him, or 4 points every 10, however you want to cut it. But I think 45, 50 points is probably the reasonable zone of expectation for Sam Girard. So yeah, this isn't technically cold. Like, it's not so cold. It's a little cold. And I'd like him to get in on a few more goals than he has been lately.
Okay, let's go now to the 55 to 60% range, and we're going back to Winnipeg again. I didn't realize I was going to make the show so Winnipeg heavy, but a hot streak player with that's only 55% rostered on Yahoo is Andrew Kopp, who had 2 goals versus Detroit on Thursday. That brought him to 4 points in 4 games in January. And you know me, Brian, I'm going to bring it up. The shots, man, 18 shots over these last 4 games for Andrew Kopp. He's been getting top power play because of some of these injuries. So, and like Ehlers on the COVID protocol, so maybe he loses that. But overall, Kopp is now pacing for 58 points on the season. That matches last year's pace. And I feel like the conversation last year was like, because that was a career year for him, right? It was like, do you think he can do this again? I don't really recall where we landed, so if you have a better memory than me, you can let me know. But at this point, he's doing it again, this 58-point pace on the season. Do you think this is like the real Andrew Kopp and he's like a 60-point guy moving forward?
Yes, I do. I looked at everything, and I do think that what we're seeing is just about right for Andrew Kopp. Just keep expecting what you've been seeing, and I think you'll be happy.
Wow, so that basically means that Kopp and Nikolai Ehlers are like pretty similar in fantasy, which is pretty wild because you definitely had to pay a lot higher of a draft pick to get Ehlers. Yeah,
yeah, like Ehlers has, of course, much greater upside than Kopp, and I said Ehlers could be a 70-point guy with all the extra shots he's taking. But yeah, and Kopp's ceiling doesn't feel much higher than 60 points. So there's that difference. But you're right, for 10 points and with all the shots Kopp is taking, yeah, that's great value from him compared to Nick Ehlers.
Yeah, I remember in our like keeper league that we're in together, I added him as a free agent after the draft, but that was in that stretch of time before the season started where there was unlimited ad drops because the 4 ads per week only started in like the first week, and I was like too impatient to like actually hold him. Like I added him and then dropped him and added someone else who like I saw was getting top line in practice or something. That was definitely a mistake. Should have just held on to Kopp. Okay, so the cold streak in this band, 55 to 60%. Let's go to a question on our Discord from Joel, who's also here in the chat, and he asked Brian, are you seeing anything to suggest that Oliver Bjorkstrand could be more than a 60 to 65 point player? So I'm taking a look at what Bjorkstrand did, and he's 56% rostered, by the way, so that's why he falls into this category. He had that 2-goal game last week versus New Jersey. Aside from that game, I'm seeing just 1 assist in his other last 7 games for Bjorkstrand. So now he's sitting at 26 points in 34 games. That's a 63-point pace, right around where he's been for the last couple of seasons. So are we just going to say at this point, this is sustainable? Like he's a 60-ish point player, just like Joel's asking, or do you still think there's upside for more?
I still think there's upside for more from Oliver Bjorkstrand, and I understand for anyone losing patience because we've been saying this since before Bjorkstrand had really broken out, and I'm not just sticking to it now because he's our guy and we've been boosting him from the start. No, I think Bjorkstrand still has more to give, and I'll explain why. But first, let's at least celebrate that Bjorkstrand has a weird stretch is behind him where he wasn't shooting at all. Bjorkstrand is now averaging almost 3 shots per game over the last 9. So glad that's over with, whatever it was, which was still never actually explained, frustratingly. But the reason I still think Bjorkstrand has that 70-plus point upside is because he's seeing more power play time than he has in past seasons. He's been a 60, 65-point guy with worse deployment, and I know he hasn't broken through that 70-point barrier this year with that extra power play time, but I think there's some variance working against him, and that's the reason why. So I think that's really the short answer. And the long answer, too. I think Bjorkstrand has better deployment, and that's why I think he can break 70. And he's taking advantage of that extra power play time, but unfortunately, seeing that dip in variance at 5-on-5 offsetting it. Nothing he's doing wrong, just what we'd call bad bounces or bad luck. I still really like Oliver Bjorkstrand, and I encourage you to stay patient, even though I know it's hard when it feels like we've been waiting 2 or 3 years for this guy to really bust through.
Okay. Or on the other hand, you can say go try to get him if he's been dropped to free agency in your shallow leagues, or if his fantasy managers want to give him up. We have it right around the same percent rostered. Andrew Kopp. Let's say you have Kopp. Do you ship him off for Bjorkstrand, or just hold on to reliable 60-point Kopp?
I would definitely go with Bjorkstrand because I don't think Bjorkstrand falls much lower than where Andrew Kopp is right now, even when things aren't going well.
Okay, so there you go. There's some advice for people who have Kopp on their team if they want to try to sell on the guy. Let's go now to the bottom 50% rosters. Now we're getting to the point where potentially, at least in shallow leagues for these next few, these are players that would be a steal, I think, if you can get them. Or I guess Brian will help determine if their hot streaks are sustainable or fleeting. This one, I know it's sustainable. Like, I guess we could just talk about how high it is. I can't believe that Matt Zuccarello is only 50% rostered on Yahoo. So he's right at the tip of that 45 to 50% range. He had 2 goals and an assist versus Anaheim on Friday in Minnesota's only game of the week. So anyone who held him through that week were thinking, ugh, only 1 game. That's a bummer. But you basically got 3 games worth of production, right? You got 3 points. You can't complain. That's now 8 points in Zuccarello's last 5 games. He now has 30 points in 28 games overall. That's above a point per game for a player rostered in less than 50% of leagues. Come on. We brought him up like a month ago, and I believe we just said he'll likely be able to keep this up while he's with Kaprizov on line 1 and power play 1, and he has been on that line, and he has kept this up. So I don't know if we have anything new to say, but I just like, what does this guy need to do to get rostered in more leagues? I have no idea, but I think it's just hard for people to come to grips with the fact that Zuccarello is a near point per game guy, but I really think he is. I don't see why he would slow down as long as he holds his deployment, and I don't see why that would happen.
I think that's it. You're asking what would Matt Zuccarello have to do to be more rostered? I think he needs to change his name to Marco Rossi, and then his rostered percentage would just jump through the roof. Nobody believes that Matt Zuccarello is going to keep this up. And by the way, we were lamenting last week how bad it would be for so many players, including Zuccarello, if Kaprizov was out. He came back Friday, so hooray for that, and hooray for Matt Zuccarello, who, by the way, Elon, you're going to love this, he's also shooting more than he ever has since joining Minnesota a couple seasons ago. I find point per game Zuccarello myself still hard to believe, but I can't tell you with numbers why it won't last. Zuccarello was on a 70-point pace last year in, he didn't play the full season, and the full season was shorter than usual, but he played really well with Kaprizov then. He's on a 90-point pace with Kaprizov right now. So I feel like Zuccarello could easily land somewhere in the middle between that 70-point and 90-point pace that we've seen recently. It feels crazy to be saying this. I'm going to acknowledge, for anyone who's looking at Matt Zuccarello and thinking 80 points, I think it's time to take away that last sound that I made with my mouth and just be like, Zuccarello, 80 points. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's also crazy, like, he's making $6 million per year. I remember he signed that deal, 5 years, $6 million per, and I believe that deal, like, got Paul Fenton fired, right? Like, it was like, this is the last straw, or maybe he did something else, but it was like, I remember that people were like, what are you doing, wasting all this money on this, like, old player? And I think he had, like, a bad first year with the team. Now it's like, okay, it's point per game. I guess, justice for this contract, it seems to be well worth it, at least at the moment, unless you want to say that anyone would be able to do this well with Kaprizov, but clearly that's not the case, right? He's obviously doing really well. Okay, let's go now to the cold streak that I want to bring up in this 45 to 50% range, and I guess you can't get much colder than someone who's not even playing at all, and let's talk about Mike Smith, okay? Because I don't know if he's in cold storage or something, but now he has a partial tear of his thumb, and he's out 1 to 2 weeks. Like, come on! Like, how many things is this guy gonna have to overcome? I am starting to get nervous that maybe he's just not going to be able to be a reliable person, or maybe I'm not starting to think that, but it's like becoming clear that, like, I don't know, because this is a whole different injury. So I guess on the plus side you can say, like, yeah, this is like unrelated to any of his other issues, and once his thumb is healed he'll be back to normal. But I don't know. And the thing is, with Edmonton, they stink lately. We'll talk about another Oiler later, but they've lost a lot of games in a row. Stuart Skinner was someone I streamed in the cupful yesterday for that game versus Ottawa. That was obviously a huge mistake. He got blown up and the Sens won. Koskinen's not any better. I feel like at this point, the Oilers pretty much need to bring in a goalie if they want to have any chance of turning this season around. So, Brian, I guess there's not much to ask about Mike Smith since he's not playing, but, like, are you going to be streaming in Skinner or Koskinen? Like, the next game for the Oilers is Thursday versus Florida, the team that's been blowing up everybody. I don't care how goalie friendly your league is. Like, people say that the cupful is actually pretty lenient for goalies. I still would, like, not be trusting an Edmonton goalie for that game on Thursday. I'd leave them in free agency.
I would also be reluctant to trust an Edmonton goalie the way they've been playing, both in the crease and as a team. Mike Smith specifically, I mean, everybody would think this is the moment I've been dreaming of, where Elon is saying Mike Smith can't be relied upon. It's nice, quote unquote, that Mike Smith has this thumb injury instead of re-aggravating whatever was hurt. But when he came back, Mike Smith was not doing well either. He had 3 bad starts when he was apparently healthy, winless in those 3 starts with an .877 save percentage. And while he's out, I don't really want, unless you're just looking for, I don't know what you're looking for, saves or wins.
At the start of the year, he was getting wins. He was doing really well.
No, but if I'm talking about Koskinen or Skinner now, though, if you're looking to start an Edmonton goalie, I'm not sure what you're looking for. I'm sure the Marc-Andre Fleury whispers are only going to get louder the longer that Edmonton continues to have trouble. I was reading a French language article saying that Marc-Andre Fleury has potentially perhaps expressed a desire to move on from Chicago and be traded to a cup contending team. And of course, Edmonton's being floated out there. So is Pittsburgh. So, we'll see what happens. But it doesn't seem, we knew the goalie situation in Edmonton was fragile. And here we are. And here they are. Elon, can I pause for a second? I have to make a work related phone call. Can I take just 2 minutes to make that call?
What am I supposed to say? Go for it, man.
Okay. Thank you. And sorry, I'll be back in less than 5.
Okay. Anyone here want to throw me a topic for me to rant about or talk about for a moment? Well, wait. Actually, let me say something for the show before Brian comes back. I'll just, as a response. Man, with the way Edmonton's defense has been playing, I almost wonder if re-signing Tyson Barrie and acquiring Duncan Keith wasn't the right offseason move for the team. Not a good situation for the defense and goalies over in Edmonton lately. Apparently, Connor McDavid was really despondent in the post-game press for that game versus Ottawa, so I feel bad for him. Hopefully, things will turn around for them soon. Okay, now I'll pause. What do I talk about? Blanket. It's all the same person. I didn't realize that was such an iconic moment of keeping Karlsson history at the time that I recorded under a blanket to try to preserve the sound quality. Shams is bringing up Suzuki. So here's an interesting thing about the Habs is that apparently Josh Anderson is scheduled to be back. Like Montreal plays Monday, Tuesday next week, right? And so apparently Josh Anderson could be back for those games. And I've been seeing that Tyler Toffoli may not be back for those games, but back later next week. So you gotta think that maybe Nick Suzuki will benefit from having these, actual good players to play with back. If I look at Suzuki, he's cold once again, only 1 goal in his last 9 games. But who's he been playing with? If you look at the last game, I guess Mike Hoffman came back. Suzuki wasn't even playing with Hoffman. Who was he playing with? Drouin and Hoffman for part of the game. Oh, yes. Hoffman and Jake Evans. Sorry, I missed that. Okay, so obviously you could replace Jake Evans with a Josh Anderson or Tyler Toffoli, and that should help. So Shane's asking, what do you think of my Uyghur trade? And then his 4 points. So what was the trade again? I wanted Uyghur. This is in our Dynasty League. Suzuki buy low. Okay, so to answer Suzuki buy low while Shane tells me what the Uyghur trade was again, I would say really low, right? I was thinking more Suzuki add out of free agency, hopefully, and you don't have to pay a price for him because Montreal is a train wreck. And just because these players are going to come back doesn't mean that things are going to turn around. I think Suzuki's a talented player. This is, kind of like Brian talking about Elias Pettersson thing. I just know that Suzuki's good. We've seen it. It's just a matter of him. I think Montreal needs to, be able to control play a little better and for, be a team that he doesn't have to be behind the 8 ball all the time. And I think having these good players back will help. What is Lewis saying here? Hello.
You can hear me, right? Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I can hear you. Everything okay at work?
It's so schools are, I'll tell you later. Well, I
don't know. You could have just said yes or no. I don't know.
Well, yeah, no, there's there's emergency phone trees, right? When everybody needs to be told a message. Mm-hmm. And so I had to do my phone tree duty.
Oh. Why can't they just email? What is this phone tree? What year is this?
So the email everyone's been emailed, but I guess it's just to make sure they heard. So I called my person, and it's funny because the person on the phone, who's above me on the phone tree, wrote me and was like, "Hey, can you call the next person?"
Oh, okay. I want to help redesign this thing. I think you should have an app or something where the person could just. You get a text message from your doctor when they want to confirm that you're going to go to the appointment, and then you just write back press 1 to confirm that you're going to. Anyway, there's ways to do this without having to make these phone calls, but I guess this is a nice way also for you to become friends with the people. So
yeah.
All right. So where were we here? Oh,
Big
Uyghur for first.
For anyone in Ottawa.
Shane, you got Uyghur? I like it. I don't care about these draft picks. Depends how high. Obviously a high draft pick is really valuable, but if it's Depends where this first is. Yeah.
What did I miss?
I don't know. I'm just answering some questions from the chat here. Panic Control is asking, Husso, is he going to take over the net? Like, all the quotes from St. Louis management is like they still believe in Binnington. You know, like you saw the coach after the game, like, oh, he had a bad game, like it happens, and we didn't play well in front of him, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, I think that it'll take a lot, but at the same time, this could be like the start of a Cam Ward or like Matt Murray career trajectory, right? Like, he was good for a bit. Like, he had a really amazing start. Then he was like sort of trailing off, but not terrible. And now it's like getting worse and worse. So I think maybe not this year, but I could see like next year. I could see Husso getting, that might be a good like hot take for next year, that Husso will be a guy that takes over if Binnington ends up cold like for a while.
I'm just pulling up both their numbers this season. Like, cause I made the case going into the year that Binnington was like actually good. And of course he's a goalie, and he's let me down. He's performing like about at like expected average NHL goalie as an NHL average goalie would. Husso's doing better though. But yeah. I agree with you. From all the quotes I've seen, seems like there's not a lot of appetite for St. Louis to like make that kind of change right now. I think their backs will probably have to be like really up against the wall. I'm just pulling up the standings right now. They're in third in their division. Like, they're pretty likely to finish top 4.
Yeah, they're in third because, lucky for them, Binnington missed a lot of games, and so they were able to get a lot of wins from Husso and Charlie Lindgren to help them get there. Imagine if it was all Binnington games, they wouldn't be in third.
If Winnipeg wins, and they've actually played a lot more games than everyone, so if Winnipeg and Dallas win like all their games in hand, then maybe St. Louis is sweating a little bit.
Yeah. All right, so let's continue the show here.
Okay.
That was fun.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for
No problem. I think we had a great time.
Good.
All right. Next up, Brian, let's go to the 40 to 45% rostered band and the hot streak. We're going to talk about another goalie here that I'd be much more excited about than anyone on Edmonton, and that's Kaapo Kähkönen, only 42% rostered on the Wild. Again, Minnesota only played one game last week. I had the opportunity to add Kähkönen in the cupful where I only have one goalie currently. I really should have, right? Or you'll tell me, maybe, but like, he was great again. He stopped 39 of 42 in the 73. He stopping 39 of 42 in the 7-3 win over Anaheim. That was Kähkönen's third win in a row with Cam Talbot on the shelf. The latest on Cam Talbot is that he's been on the ice for practices, isn't expected to play Monday, so Kähkönen gets at least one more game before Talbot comes back, though that game is against Colorado, which is a bit of a scary start, but also like maybe a good opportunity to see if he can hold up against some of the hottest teams in the league. So, Brian, how do you see things shaking out rest of season once Talbot is healthy? Like, has Kähkönen proven himself enough to be worthy of being in contention for the job, or do you think it's just going to go back to Talbot getting the volume of the starts once he's back?
Unlike Mike Smith in Kähkönen's last 3 starts, he is doing amazing. 3 wins and a .937 save percentage. If you compare Kähkönen to Talbot from their numbers for the season so far, Kähkönen's got a .917 save percentage to Talbot's .907, 70% quality starts for Kähkönen versus Talbot's 58% quality starts. Both are playing below their expected save percentage, but Kähkönen is closer to it than Talbot is. And Talbot is doing a pretty solid Minnesota Devin Dubnyk impression all the while. So it's funny because Minnesota tends to find these guys who would probably do really poorly anywhere else, but they protect their goalies so well that you don't really notice it. And they're like, yeah, we like Devin Dubnyk or Cam Talbot's veteran leadership, and we don't have a plan B because our plan A is to just protect the heck out of our goalie and never let them actually fail. So I don't know exactly what the long-term plan is in Minnesota, or I should say the short-term for the rest of the season, because long-term, I'm sure they'd like to pass the torch to Kähkönen. And right now, I don't see in the short-term why Minnesota would stop riding Kähkönen while he's hot. Keep in mind, it's been hard in the past for Kähkönen to stay consistent. We've seen him go on great runs and then fall off, or we've seen him not be able to get on a run. So it's great Kähkönen's on it now. Let's just take it on a game-by-game basis and see how much longer Kähkönen can keep this up, because the longer he can, obviously, the more significant the challenge he mounts to Cam Talbot, who has not set a very high bar, but that hasn't seemed to bother Minnesota. So there's a lot of fun factors in play. If I had to guess, the odds are against Kähkönen taking over the starter's job from Talbot, but I have him in a league, and I am definitely holding on to him until I see Talbot actually enter the crease. And maybe I'll even wait another game, because if Talbot comes in and bombs, then Kähkönen might get right back in.
Yeah. So is this a head-to-head league, Brian?
It's the Cupful.
Oh, so let me ask you this. Monday is coming up, the first day of a matchup, and Minnesota goes up against Colorado. Are you going to play Kokkonen against a team that just scored 9 goals in their last 2 games?
I have no choice.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I mean,
I'm
you do
going
have a
for it.
choice. Oh, yeah. Okay.
I could bench. In the cupful, I mean, we try and make sure negative points are hard to come by. I thought you were going to say because Minnesota isn't going to play again until Friday. So what am I going to? Am I going to hold Kokkonen when Talbot might be healthy on Friday?
Well, I guess you could reassess, I guess, after see how
Yeah,
things go on Monday.
based on the Colorado result, I'm going to play him. He's been so good, and Minnesota's so good defensively. That's the thing. So
Gotcha.
as scared as I might be about Kokkonen facing Colorado, Kokkonen on Minnesota facing Colorado, a slightly better prospect.
Yeah, that should be a fun game. I'd like to watch that game. Hopefully, I'll get the chance. Let's do a cold streak now in the 40 to 45% rostered band. And I'm going to go back to the Oilers for, I guess it's now our third time or second time on the show. But Evan Bouchard is the name I want to bring up. He's fallen to 43% rostered. And I don't know, maybe that's even too high because the Oilers are a mess right now. They haven't won a game since they lost Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and maybe even before that. Like they lost 6-4 to Ottawa, like we discussed. Bouchard had a really good start to the year. He was getting big minutes. I was really high on him, and now he's pointless in his last 5 games. And in this last game against Ottawa, he was on the third pairing. He only played 12 minutes and 38 seconds. Tyson Barrie got more time than him. I thought my whole thing was that Tyson Barrie might not be worth holding aside from like a power play role because he's only getting third pairing minutes. Now, if like Bouchard is on the third pairing, I don't see any reason to hold him because he doesn't get a power play role either. At one point, we were calling him like a likely 45 to 50 point guy just because he's exposed to all these players that score so much. Now, Edmonton isn't scoring that much. Not to say that, Draisaitl and McDavid can figure out a way to turn this around. So where are you at now with Evan Bouchard? Do you still feel the way we felt about him like a month ago, or do you think this cold streak is going to be sustainable for the rest of the year and he's probably not worth holding in most formats?
I think it's a similar answer to Sam Girard, right? That Evan Bouchard is probably not always going to get in on all the goals being scored on Edmonton, but he'll get in on enough that he's worth rostering when he is, and he's not worth rostering when he isn't. Speaking specifically to Bouchard's ice time, he had played 24 minutes for 3 consecutive games before becoming another Dave Tippett victim and playing just 12 and a half minutes on the third pairing because Tippett, I guess, didn't like some of the things Bouchard was doing and was punished accordingly. But Bouchard, on the whole, is still doing the stuff we'd like to see from him, if not Dave Tippett, putting up 2.5 shots a game, getting a hit every now and again, some nights with some good blocks numbers. So long as Bouchard gets those minutes back, I think things are going to even out all right for him. He's only been on the ice for 4 goals over his last 5 games. No, I think I fact checked that and that's wrong. I think things will even out okay for him. I think the over under for Bouchard is probably 45, and I will lean just a little under rather than over. But I don't think Bouchard's value has changed substantially because of this quote unquote cold stretch that he's on.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm also maybe more of a panicker than you. And when I see like a 12-minute game, I get nervous. Maybe see like what happens now in the next couple of games if he could get back to the top pairing.
It would be really surprising. Yeah. That sounds like a message sending kind of thing. And of course, the way that I pinged all the Edmonton followers. We have a feature on our Discord server for patrons where like you can represent your team. And then when somebody wants to ask a question about your team, they can tag everybody who is, chosen to rep, for example, the Oilers or the others. And it's just like everyone's mad at Dave Tippett being like, this is just how he acts as a coach. He's out of ideas. He doesn't know what he's doing anymore. And so, the players get the brunt of that. And so I don't think Dave Tippett, honestly, as hard a time he's having surviving as the Oilers coach, I don't think benching Bouchard and keeping him on the third pair is going to help him anymore. I think that's going to hurt him, actually. I think he needs Evan Bouchard, probably more than Evan Bouchard needs him, certainly more than Evan Bouchard wants him. So I don't think that Bouchard's ice time is going to be long-term affected, which means that I don't think his outlook is going to be long-term affected.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I selfishly wouldn't mind if Bouchard ends up in the doghouse because I have Philip Broberg in my dynasty league, and I wouldn't mind if he got called up and then got a few more minutes than he did in his last stretch. But that's just me. Okay, so let's go now to the 35 to 40% range, and I've got a hot player that's 39% rostered on the Kings. But to be honest, I just want to talk about this whole line. It's the second line on the Kings: Arvidsson, No, and Trevor Moore. So Arvidsson, 39% rostered, and he's on fire. He's got 8 points in his last 6 games, highlighted by that 2-goal, 2-assist game. That was the outburst versus Philly on January 1st, but he also assisted on one of No's 2 goals in Saturday's game. Speaking of No, only 18% rostered, but yeah, 2 goals on Saturday versus Seattle, brought him to 7 points in his last 6 games. And then this guy who previously was a nobody, but all of a sudden is 8% rostered on Yahoo, which is higher than I expected, but for good reason. Trevor Moore had his 3rd straight 2-assist game on Saturday, bringing him to 11 points in his previous 6 games. By the way, plus on top of all of this, LA has a great streaming schedule next week. They play Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So I feel like if you're in a shallow league, grab Arvidsson if you can, for sure. Like, I feel like in any league you want to grab Arvidsson because he's also on the top power play. Then probably even in a deeper league, you're taking a look at No and Trevor Moore, at least as a stream. But Brian, what do you think in general about this hot run by this second line over on LA? Arvidsson, No, and Moore can't go games without getting points. So you love to see it, right?
You love to see it. I think that's all there really is to say about this. Like, Dano, you've tried to convince me before that Dano is like a full season roster kind of guy, and I've pushed back on that. Trevor Moore is definitely not. Relative to Dano. If Dano isn't, then Moore definitely isn't. And of course, Victor Arvidsson is. It's nice to see Victor Arvidsson succeeding, even though, remember, he started the year with Anze Kopitar, and he's since been bumped off. Although I think I just saw somebody on LA is going into COVID protocol.
Yeah, Kempe is going into protocol, so there's a top power play spot available or a top line spot. But they can't change. There's no way they're going to change this lineup, right? Like, they're going to keep these 3 together, I'd imagine, but there is an open spot on the power play.
Yeah, so we'll see. Watch how the LA lines shift because Kempe is out for the next couple games, at least in the neighborhood of probably. So keep an eye on the lines. We like Victor Arvidsson. Dano and Moore, you can ride on this streak, but I don't think they're 18% and 8% rostered respectively, and I don't think they should be substantially more rostered than that.
Oh man, so quick to whisk away those guys. I guess, we need to see it a bit longer. This Trevor Moore thing, like, I didn't even really know who this guy was. But this run is, like, not so short term, right? Like, he's been hot for, like, almost 10 games now. So I guess Brian's saying that he doesn't expect it to last, which is reasonable. But at the same time, I'll definitely bring him up next week if he has another good 4 games, because it's something that I'm taking notice of. He's a free agent in my Dynasty League. I don't even say that. It's definitely something... This hot streak, definitely something I'm taking notice of. I'm curious to see if there's more to this guy that we just haven't seen yet, because he's never gotten an opportunity, right? Like, Trevor Moore's never been a top 6er. Now he is. So we'll see if he can keep it up. The cold streak I've got for you in this 35 to 40% range is Anders Lee over on the Islanders. We waited so long for the Islanders to finally play. It seemed like a month went by where the Islanders didn't get a game. Finally, they played 2 games last week. And if you had Anders Lee, you waited all that time just to get nothing at all, right? Like, the Islanders scored 3 goals versus Jersey on Thursday. Lee didn't get in on any of that, and then they were shut out by the Caps on Saturday, so that's it. No points in 2 games recently for Anders Lee. Like LA, at least the Islanders do have a good schedule next week. They play Monday, Tuesday, so if you have Lee, I guess you hold for at least those 2 games. Plus, he was on a run of 8 points in 8 games before they took all that time off. Though before that, Lee went pointless for 6 straight. Overall, even with this recent hot streak that he had, like, Lee's having a terrible season, right? He is less than half point per game on the year. He's, like, pacing for his worst pace since 2015-16. So, Brian, is this current 2-game cold streak, which I know it's only 2 games, but it's all we've seen in forever, but also his season-long pace, are these both sustainable in their badness for the rest of the year?
It's an unfortunate stat line for Anders Lee. He's doing his job in scoring goals. He has 10 of them in 25 games, but only 2 assists in 25 games. It's 12 points total in 25 games. Anders Lee has steadily lost minutes under Barry Trotz, though he has offset that by shooting a little more and from more dangerous places, even though his minutes are going down. But I think one of the reasons that Anders Lee has so few assists so far is because his points participation is down. A lot of guys you've brought up tonight actually are fine. Like, you're finding all these guys in like the 40 to 45% points participation range, which as a defenseman, as an offensive defenseman, that's likely. As a forward, no, that's unsustainably low. Lee historically has been between 60 and 65% points participation kind of guy. So that's one reason why Anders Lee should do better than he has so far. Also, Lee has just 3 power play points so far, despite being on the top unit. I'm over being excited about Anders Lee. There was a time that I was really, really thinking that he was about to break through. I just don't see that being possible anymore now that we see the way the Islanders play. I still think he's probably a 55-point guy, maybe 60 points, but kind of one of the more boring players to be at that number. And 55, 60 points is nothing generally very exciting. But keep in mind, the Islanders have a ton of extra games to play compared to a lot of other teams in the league. So that might be one reason to give him a little bump up your watch list if you're considering adding Anders Lee to your roster.
Yeah, I think definitely for next week at least, if you have an open spot, grab them for Monday, Tuesday, see how it goes. You could always drop after that. Okay, let's go down to the 30 to 35% range. I'm going back to LA. We left and now we're back to talk about one more player, 35% rostered on Yahoo. That's Cal Peterson, who's had 3 straight 1 or 0 goals against games since he actually started getting games. Brian, you mentioned that Quick had that great start to the year. He started tailing off a little bit. He played well also this past week. He got a game versus Pittsburgh on Thursday that LA won 6-2. Next week starts with a back-to-back. So LA plays San Jose on Monday and then Tampa Bay on Tuesday, and then a tough matchup versus Colorado on Thursday. So I'll be very interested to see how LA decides to deploy their 2 goalies. But yeah, Cal Peterson, super hot. Do you think that it's sustainable?
We'll keep watching and find out. You're asking me if I think a goalie's play is sustainable. Cal Peterson's been all over the place this season, but we talked about him last week and several times this year, saying Cal Peterson has a good track record. He is tracking to be a legit NHL starter. And it would be great if he took this opportunity that's in front of him. He could also just keep alternating with Jonathan Quick. I think it's even odds that Peterson or Quick is going to fall off and Seed starts first. And whoever does sort of take the short-term advantage in getting starts could just as easily lose that in the medium or long term. So for now, definitely, if you're into Kaapo Kahkonen, Cal Peterson is not waiting on an injured goalie to return. Cal Peterson has a healthy guy he shares the crease with and is still out playing him. So that bodes well for Cal Peterson. Plus, like I said, his track record. So I like Cal Peterson as a goalie. And if you're looking for a starter and he's available, there's a chance that he can work himself into a 1A kind of position in LA.
Yeah, and I think on short shifts, Ben and Lewis were mentioning how LA is looking like a good team. Maybe partially based on this play that Brian doesn't think is sustainable from the second line, but still they're doing well. They're winning games recently, so that's pretty good.
Don't try and change my words to say that LA is not. I like LA too. I was saying that before the year. They were one of my picks to be dark horses. Disregarded at the start and then coming on strong.
Yeah, but can they still be winning all these games once Trevor Moore and Phil Deneau stop putting up these points that they've been putting up recently?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess they'll have to get really good goaltending then.
Trevor Moore and Phil Deneau are not there to put up points, for the record.
Hey, well, I mean, why are they on the second line then? But anyway, okay. Anyways, let's move on.
They're there to prevent points.
Oh, I see. Okay. So the cold streak I've got for the 30 to 35% range isn't really that surprising. I think we'll get to a point soon where I'll stop bringing up cold streaks for these low percent rostered. But I guess Dominic Kubalik, I wanted to bring up just because he's kind of hot and kind of cold, depending on how you want to look at it. So I thought I'd squeeze him in here. He has goals in each of his last 2 games. Before that, he was pointless in 6. He's been on a line with Jonathan Toews and Alex DeBrincat. And Jonathan Toews, by the way, who's 33% rostered, so also in this band, he's got 5 assists in his last 6 games. So maybe it's more of a hot streak. I'm just curious to get your take on another second line that has players that we've pretty much given up on. Again, it's kind of similar to LA, right? We have DeBrincat, who's the Arvidsson in this situation, the one player that we have a lot of faith in. We even have more faith in DeBrincat than Arvidsson. But then we have these 2 tag-alongs that we maybe didn't have much interest in a couple weeks ago, but now Kubalik and Toews seem to be doing pretty well. So what do you think about these 2 on the second line moving forward? Do you think their bad season overall is what's sustainable, or this recent stretch where they're starting to put up some points?
I hate to say it because Kubalik and Toews have both been so frustrating this season, so worthless, so unrewarding to anybody who showed them any amount of patience at any point this season. But I'm going to go ahead and say that for Kubalik and Toews, playing with DeBrincat is a reason for me to give them the first look I've given them in a long, long time. So that's my answer. And I'm not optimistic, but I have to consider them because DeBrincat is so good. And we know Kubalik is talented. We know Toews is talented, but we don't know quite at what level he's playing at still. Well, we do know he's not playing the way Jonathan Toews has played in recent years. So that's concerning, but that both of them have at least, some talent and skill, and they're playing with Alex DeBrincat, good things could happen, and they might be worth a look for at least a short-term stream to see if they can keep this up. Of course, they need to stay with Alex DeBrincat for it to work out. And I don't know how long that might last for. But in the short term, yeah, you could take a new look at Kubalik and Toews for the first time in a while.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, they obviously are talented players. We've seen them do well in the past, like Toews especially. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep this up. If you're taking a really short-term look, Chicago plays on Monday, right? They play against Seattle, and their goalie that's actually doing well, Chris Drieger, is now on the COVID protocol, which means that they're going to have to trot out Philip Grubauer again, which means for sure Chicago's going to score a bunch of goals. So it might be a good game to stream them in for. Then you can decide if you want to hold all the way to their next game, which is until Friday. Okay, so let's go now to the 25 to 30% range. Here's a player on a hot streak that I'm really surprised that you can get him this low at only 26% roster, which means he's available in a lot of the people's leagues that are listening to this. That's Nico Hischier. I'll tell you, Brian, he's not available in any of my leagues. And to be fair, we haven't been doing Hischier any favors on keeping Karlsson. I feel like I've been bringing up Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt, and we've been discussing Sharon Govich, who is playing with Hughes and Bratt so much. I've been drooling over these guys. I've forgot to mention this guy, this other former first overall pick, Nico Hischier, who's on a great run right now, 8 points in his last 8 games. So to be fair, before that, he only had 14 points in his first 23 games. So that's obviously why his percent roster dropped so much. But Brian, has this recent stretch made you think that people need to consider pausing the pod and rushing to grab Nico Hischier if he's still available in their leagues, which he very well might be?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a pause the pod. Let me start that over. I don't think that's a good way to come in. I don't know if it's a pause the pod moment for Nico Hischier, Elon, but it's at least while the pod is playing, go add Hischier to your watch list and then compare him to the rest of your roster and see if he might be a worthy replacement for anyone you've got. Hischier's on a 58-point pace now, which seems right to me. And honestly, if I had to guess whether it's going to be a higher or lower than 58 points the rest of the season, I would go higher, because right now Nico Hischier is on the top power play unit, but he's pacing for just 11 power play points. So if you just give him a respectable, 18 power play points to pace for the rest of the way, that's a 65-point pace for Nico Hischier, which is almost certainly worth rostering in just about any format. So yeah, I hope while I've been saying this, you didn't pause the pod, but you did go to see if Hischier is available and made some decisions about whether or not he's worth adding to your roster.
Yeah, maybe don't pause, but maybe put it on a slower speed so that you don't miss too much while you're going to grab Nico. Okay, that was a stupid thing I just said. Okay, so let's go now to the cold streak in the 25 to 30% range. Another goalie cold streak, that's Jake Allen, another injured goalie, kind of like Mike Smith. But I just wanted to bring up the Montreal goalie situation in general. Montreal, by the way, congratulations. They're now in last place in the league. It finally happened. So I have a friend who's a big Habs fan that's really happy and is hoping that Carey Price doesn't come back specifically so that Montreal continues to be terrible and gets a chance at the first overall pick in the upcoming draft. So that's the current state that I'm aware of Habs fandom. But yeah, Jake Allen was off for a month. I had him. Luckily, I was able to stash him. He was on the COVID protocol and stuff. So then finally, I got him back into my roster for that game last week on Tuesday. Or Wednesday, he stunk, right? He let in 2 goals in 7 shots versus Boston, and then he got sidelined with a lower body injury. I'm pretty sure I would have dropped him after that game if he didn't become IR eligible once again. So now he's day-to-day. And so now we take a look at the Habs goalie situation. Still no timetable on Carey Price from what we've seen. So he's not even practicing with the team. So we don't know when he'll be back. Sam Montembeault was actually okay in relief for Allen versus Boston. He stopped 31 of 34. Then he played the next game in Chicago and stopped 28 of 31 in the overtime loss. So I think that's a success for Sam Montembeault to only let in 3 goals in each of these games. Then we've got Caden Primo back up from the minors. The last game he played was really great, right? He stopped 37 of 39 in a 3-2 win over Philly back on December 16th. So Brian, any advice regarding the goalie situation of the 32nd ranked team in the league? Are you going to take any of these goalies out of free agency? I guess Montembeault or Primo while Allen is hurt?
I would be pretty scared too. Even if Jake Allen were healthy, even if Carey Price were healthy, I'd be reluctant to grab the Montreal goalie, to be honest. Montreal, noted shutdown team in recent memory, suddenly ranking 29th in the league in team defense at 5-on-5. We've been through the reasons why. Losing Phil Deneau hurt a lot for starters, and then, lost Tatar and Weber, and Gallagher's been hurt, and so is Anderson. Anyway, I'm avoiding the Montreal goalies. Honestly, I'm treating them in the way I have, I'm trying to think of other comparable teams that I just didn't want to touch their goalies. Buffalo, probably, in Ottawa as well. Even though both have had, some little shining lights lately that we can look at to see value in rostering, I would not be very interested if I cared about any of my like save percentage or goals against numbers or wins or losses. The only reason to roster a Montreal goalie right now is for saves and volume. And that's it. They're probably going to screw up every other category if you roster them. So I recommend against it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I don't have any faith in Sam Montembeault. I guess Caden Primo is somewhat interesting if the opponent isn't too scary, I guess. Like, I definitely wouldn't want him against like a Florida or Colorado. But yeah, I totally agree with you. They also lost like Jeff Petrie in terms of like he's just not the same player that he was. So he did actually score. For what it's worth, Jeff Petrie scored a goal in his last game. So is that a sign of things to come? I'm definitely not going to call him a hot streak now because he scored one goal, but it was his first of the year. So who knows? Though he still isn't on the top power play. We'll actually talk about the person who's been on the top power play in Montreal in a little while, but we're still too high percent rostered to talk about this mystery person. So let's go now to the 20 to 25% rostered range, talk about a defenseman who's also not on the top power play, but doing pretty well. And actually, Filip Hronek, who's 22% rostered on Yahoo, I famously, I don't know, in my brain, it's famously brought him up on last week's show as someone on a cold streak. I was about to ask you if I should drop him, and then you were like, oh, wait a second, he just scored a goal. He scored a goal while I was talking about him. He scored, and he followed that up with a pretty solid week. He had 2 assists versus San Jose. Then even though Detroit got shut out by Winnipeg, Hronek still got 6 shots in that game. And then he had an assist versus Buffalo on Saturday. So I don't know. I guess I shouldn't have doubted him. Glad I held on. I don't really have a question about him. I just wanted to bring him up and say, like, I was close to dropping him, and now he's back, as a solid guy on my roster. Like, do you think I'll get to a point later, Brian, where I'm going to be asking you again if I should drop Hronek? Yeah, okay.
I do. I mean,
so you think he's not going to keep it up to too much? Well, I'm not asking for much, right? I'm just asking for like 40-ish point pace. If he gets a point every 2 games, I'm okay.
Okay, well then I don't think you will. I think you'll be happy with Hronek if that's what you're expecting. I thought like you wanted more consistency because you look at that 6-shot game for Hronek, it was bookended by 2 0-shot games. And so, he's not going to set the world on fire. He might not do anything for you some nights, but overall 40, 45 points seems like a reasonable expectation for Hronek.
Okay, cool. And then the cold streak I've got here in this 20 to 25% rostered band, it was fun while it lasted for Nino Niederreiter. We had a lot of fun on the show, telling people they need to rush to grab him while he was playing with Aho. He is no longer playing with Sebastian Aho. His last game, he was playing with Martinuk and Kotkaniemi, and Aho was playing with Teravainen and Seth Jarvis. So now it's definitely Seth Jarvis that's the excited guy to roster, though, again, Carolina changes their lines all the time. But yeah, Nino is now pointless in 4 games. Is it even worth looking under the hood for this guy who's like was so hot and now is so cold, or is this just 100% just deployment? And if he gets back with Aho, expect him to be worth rostering again. And when he's not with Aho, he's totally useless.
That's it. That's all that needs to be said about Nino Niederreiter. 100% based on deployment. This is what we've learned over the last couple of years. Seth Jarvis, by the way, not doing much with his deployment in Niederreiter's former spot. 1 goal and no assists and 5 shots in Jarvis's last 4 games. Of course, his deployment could change and Nino could be back on the top line. It doesn't seem to matter in Carolina what actually happens on the ice, just that Rod Brindamore likes to shake lines up every now and then to keep things fresh. So just keep an eye on the latest game day lines, wink, wink. If you don't follow that on Twitter, at Game Day Lines. It's a really, really great Twitter account run by Elon and one of our patrons and listeners, Shams.
Yeah, there's also a website that goes along with it, Brian, GameDayLineTweets.com, where you can check. Like a lot of people go to Daily Faceoff. It's an okay site for sure. I'm not going to say anything bad about Daily Faceoff. They show the lines. We've got the lines listed on that site, which are just the tweets. So you don't have to worry about like, are these up to date? When's it from? Like you just look at the tweets. You pick the team. I think it's a really useful site. I use it myself. Like, and it's nice because the site runs itself. Like if Shams or I do a retweet, it just automatically goes up to the site. So GameDayLineTweets.com. And yeah, definitely, I agree with you, Brian. As soon as you see Nino get back on the top line into practice, you don't have to wait to see if he'll like do well. He probably will do something. Like he'll be worth grabbing at that point. Let's go now to the Let's go now to the 15 to 20% rostered. Oh man, let's go now to the 15 to 20% rostered range. I think we're at a point now where I'll stop doing cold streaks, since at this point it's not surprising for a player that's not rostered to be so cold. But yeah, first of all, this isn't a hot streak or a cold streak, just an FYI that Josh Anderson, who's 16% rostered, will potentially be back with the Habs to maybe help them out as soon as next week. I was reading that he might be back for their Monday, Tuesday to start next week. So if you're looking for an early week stream, you want to take a shot on someone, I don't know what the deployment will be, but maybe Josh Anderson gets back in the top 6. Actually, I also saw that Tyler Toffoli should be back soon. So I'm definitely not saying these are going to be the answers to all of the Habs problems, but I don't know, like if you're looking at like a Nick Suzuki who's been super cold, maybe he can start improving if he gets to play with Toffoli again and or Josh Anderson, and also take a look at Anderson and Toffoli if they've been dropped in your leagues. You know, everyone's had so many IR spots being filled by all the players on COVID protocol. So maybe these like players who generally would have been rostered have been dropped. Also, they weren't having like the most amazing seasons, but yeah, take a look at Josh Anderson and or Tyler Toffoli. Then yes, we're in the 15 to 20% range. I already brought up Phil Deneau at 18%, so I'll still give you a bonus here. If you need blocks for you people in peripherals leagues, you got to look at Brayden McNabb at this point. 16% rostered. It's obviously all 16% is because of those blocks, right? But his look at this game log of the last few games for McNabb. We're seeing 5, 4, 4, 4. Like it's like either 5 or 4 every game lately for McNabb with the blocks. Brian, how do you even, like, can I ask you, like, are his blocks sustainable? Like, is there anything you can look at aside from just, like, time on ice? Like, I saw that Alec Martinez may be ready to return soon, so I wonder if that eats into McNabb's ice time, which then eats into his blocks. But do you have any other ways to look into any fancy stats to determine if a block number is sustainable?
The two things I would look at to see if a block is if block numbers are sustainable are time on ice, like you mentioned, and also a penalty kill roll often helps too. And McNabb has been playing a big one lately and usually always does. So keep an eye on that when Martinez comes back. But blocks are, one of the more repeatable stats. If a guy is putting up a lot of blocks over the course of a year or two and his deployment isn't changing, likely he's going to keep doing that unless, of course, there's a coaching change and the team plays a different style. Also, talking about Josh Anderson, Elon, the problem with adding a Montreal Canadian is they have no lines I'm actually interested in. Right, you've got Nick Suzuki playing with Mike Hoffman and Jake Evans, and then you've got Jonathan Drouin playing with Christian Dvorak and Rem Pitlick, and Cole Caulfield playing with Ryan Poehling and Arturi Lehkonen. Like, it's hard to really get into even 2/3 of any of those lines, let alone the third, like all three. So yeah, I would love to see Josh Anderson on the Suzuki line, but who knows? His peripherals are helpful though, so just don't expect big point contributions. If you are looking for points, I'm going to throw out someone who's 23% rostered, Elon, and that's Cole Caulfield, who I know a lot of us have been through it with Caulfield this year. But since going back almost his return from the HL, he got a goal a few games in, but since then has no goals in his last 15 games. So Caulfield has been averaging almost 3 shots a game over those 15 games, 40 shots for Cole Caulfield. And I feel like that might be a reason to be interested in him, along with, if you're looking for a Monday, Tuesday stream, if you're comparing the Habs to the Islanders, like no one takes shots there except for a guy you're about to talk about. So I'll let you get to him. But Cole Caulfield is someone who's shooting, who might be worth a look compared to a lot of the other Monday, Tuesday guys who might be available to you in deeper leagues.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just bring it up in this 10 to 15% range. I wanted to bring up Oliver Wahlstrom, who, like Caulfield, isn't scoring, but he is shooting. Like Islanders, like I said, have just played those 2 games recently, and Wahlstrom didn't get any points, but he had 7 shots versus Washington and 4 versus New Jersey. He also had 2 and 3 hits in those games, so I wanted to bring Wahlstrom as someone up that might potentially get you some goals. So Brian, if you had the option between Wahlstrom and Caulfield, who would you take? Wahlstrom's, by the way, been on the top power play on the Islanders, if that helps.
I would take Wahlstrom. I would. It's funny because shots on the Islanders need to be prorated. They're like dog years, right? Like how does it work with dog years? 1 dog year is 7 human years.
I think it's the opposite, but yeah, and I think that the formula also depends on the dog's weight, but we don't have to get too deep into that.
So 1 shot in Long Island is like worth 2 1/4 shots on any other team. So like that Wahlstrom had 7 shots in a game for the Islanders. That's like a 15 shot equivalency right there. Of course, Barry Trotz might not like that. We'll see if he snuffs that out. But amongst all the other Islanders not named Matt Barzal, and including Anders Lee and including Brock Brock Nelson and Beauvillier and Pajot, I think I would just be interested in trying out Oliver Wahlstrom and seeing where this goes. If you want a deeper cut, who I didn't mention, someone else on the Isles who's shooting with significantly less ice time is Kiefer Bellows, who's managing, 2 or 3 shots a night recently with only 11 to 13 minutes of ice time most games, but he's also someone who's doing really well in putting pucks on net for someone on the Islanders and for someone seeing as little ice time as he is.
Okay, yeah. So again, if you're the type of person that wants to stream in a player for 2 days, try one of them. I actually did add Wahlstrom in one of my leagues. I did not consider Cole Caulfield. I'll be honest, I'm also have no faith in the Habs right now. Though maybe that'll change. Like you said, when these reinforcements come in, maybe Caulfield gets on a more exciting line, and it's not just hoping that some of these shots go in. Okay, so I have one more hot streak in this 10 to 15% range. This is someone I'm really excited about, and he's been doing well lately, and that's Anton Lundell. Of course, I had to bring up the Panthers one more time. They scored, these 21 goals over the last 3 games, and believe it or not, we've got someone available way down at 10 to 15% rostered on this red hot team, and that's Lundell, who scored 2 goals on 8 shots versus Columbus, and that brought him to 11 points in his last 9 games. So sure, he's only on the third line. He was playing with Maxime Mamin and Frank Vetrano in Saturday's game, and sure, Anton Lundell only plays on the second power play, but I think he's really talented. I think he's a really good player, and the only reason he's in the bottom 6 is because a lot of players on this team are really talented, many of whom we've discussed already on this show. So I feel like the upside is really high for in future years. In dynasty leagues, I'd be all over Lundell. He just needs to find a way to get one of those center spots, which I guess are going to be hard to get because Bennett and Barkov seem pretty cemented. I don't know how it happens. All I know is regardless of his deployment, I'd be into Lundell right now in most leagues just because the Panthers are scoring so much and he's clearly getting in on a lot of it.
Well, he's rolling. Yeah, Florida's scoring 7 to 9 goals a game. Then you'd think Lundell might be on the ice for 1 or 2 of them. And by the way, he seems like he could be actually good, right? This isn't news, but when Lundell was seeing some top 6 deployment this year, he didn't look so out of place. Mostly came when Barkov was injured. So Lundell was playing with Verhaeghe and Reinhart. And I don't think it's likely that he gets back up there into the top 6 without another injury. But good for Anton Lundell, making the most of this season.
Yeah, definitely I don't think it's a hot take to say that he might be good. I think it's clear that he's good. Okay, actually, let me say that again. Let me say it in a less rude way. Yeah. Yeah, I think actually I'm pretty convinced that he's good. I don't need to be oh, it seems like he might be good. Oh, wait, let me try one more time. Yeah, so for people who aren't aware, Lundell was drafted 12th overall in 2020. The Panthers clearly expect him to be good. Maybe it's surprising that he's doing so well at the tender age of 20 and with weak deployment, but I know that Victor Nuno's come on the podcast before and said that he's super high on Lundell. And, I was probably naysaying and being well, how good of a year can he really have in the bottom 6? But of course, this is the Florida Panthers, so anything could happen on this team. Yeah, he's really great. Let's go down to the 5% to 10% range. Hard to generally find a goalie who's going to play games for you in this range, but we have one potentially, though he's burned me so many times. I just can't get behind recommending him, but I'll bring him up. Matt Murray, 6% rostered. He was already sent to the minors this year. He went through waivers. The Oilers, who need a goalie, even they weren't interested. I wonder if Matt Murray got waived again, if this time the Oilers would take him. But yeah, he's healthy now. We'll see how long that lasts. I was actually talking to my wife's parents, family friend Arkady, who was telling me that he watched a game yesterday and he saw someone run into Matt Murray and he's worried if he'd be injured. And I haven't seen anything on Twitter about that, but knowing Matt Murray, he probably is injured.
A joke. Was he talking about he saw someone bump into Matt Murray on the street? Or did
no, in the game.
Okay, I just thought oh yeah, I saw him walking out of the rink and he ran into someone. Oh, I don't know if he's hurt, but I haven't seen any news. Let's. I mean, thank you, Arkady, for the insider tip, but I have not seen anything from a reliable source. Not to say anything against Arkady here, but I haven't seen a usual source say that Fair. Matt Murray is injured. Health the thing is always an issue for him, though.
Yeah, as soon as you see anything hit Matt Murray in a way that's non-standard, you have to be worried that he's going to be out for a month. So I think Arkady's on the ball.
Every shot against is an injury risk for Matt Murray, unfortunately. Yeah.
But okay, enough making fun of the guy because he's had 2 good games this past week. 2 wins against the Flames and the Oilers. he was really good against the Flames, only led in 1 goal. In his game versus the Oilers, he stopped 33 of 37 to help the Sens pull out that win. Sens are an interesting team. We're going to talk about some hot streak forwards in a sec. But yeah, like I like the Sens in terms of their offensive abilities. So it's not like Matt Murray has to be like so insanely good to like steal wins for them. He just has to not be terrible, which lately hasn't been hard. But yeah, if he's available, seems like he's the starter for now. So I think like Anton Forsberg is also there, but I'd imagine they'd play Murray if he keeps playing well. So what do you think, Brian? Are we going to recommend for people to add Matt Murray? I feel like if we do, they're going to get blown up. I'm just going to say it. But what do you think?
Yeah. Well, every time I've recommended to myself that I add Matt Murray, I've been blown up. So I don't see why it would be any different for a listener. I mean, health is an issue, as we talked about. Talent is also an issue for Matt Murray. So you play him at your own risk. But if he plays half decently, there is not an apparent ready challenger in the Ottawa crease. They've tried Forsberg for a bit. He didn't hold up. They tried Gustafsson for a bit. He didn't hold up. I think Gustafsson could hold up eventually, but maybe not this season. So it's up to Murray. If he plays half decent, there's big value to be had. So you might as well try him for a game or two, and then you pay the Matt Murray tax when he blows you up. But that's the price you pay to take a chance at finding some big value on the wire.
Yeah, and the thing is, like I said, I'm kind of interested in the Sens, so I would want their starting goalie at this point in some situations. Anyways, so another hot streak in this range, Igor Sharangovich. Is it Igor? Igor. Yeah, their hot streak in this range. Igor Sharangovich, 7% rostered. He scored again. Like the Devils only played 1 game last week, and Sharangovich scored again. I think it's his 4th game in a row scoring a goal. He's playing with Jack Hughes. I already asked you about him, right? Like, just get him. Just trust me. Add Sharangovich for as long as he's playing with Hughes. It's like a Nino Niederreiter situation for me. Playing with Aho, I want Sharangovich playing with Hughes, especially on this hot run. And I also want to bring up Ben Sherratt. So I mentioned that there's another player on Montreal who's had a top power play role ahead of Jeff Petrie, and lately it's been Sherratt, who's 9% rostered on Yahoo, and he's actually doing okay. He had a power play assist versus Chicago on Thursday. Now that brings him to 2 assists in his last 3 games, along with good peripherals, 13 shots in those last 3 games, 8 hits, 7 blocks. So if you need a D in a bangers league, like I feel like what's not to like, especially down at 9% rostered. As I don't know what does Dave call the ludicrous streamer of the week? I feel like that's 2%, but at least in a somewhat likely available spot in a multi-category league, I would be into Ben Sherratt for like, not expecting a ton of points, but at least you get peripherals and the chance for points. Now that he's on the top power play, which may be getting Josh Anderson and or Tyler Toffoli soon, so it might be a slightly better power play.
Go for it, right? That's all I can say. Except Josh Anderson wasn't on the top power play even before he was injured, so I don't know that he might boost it. But maybe I'll just do that again. Go for it. Although keep in mind, Josh Anderson was not on the top power play even when he was healthy. So that doesn't necessarily change anything for Sierra, but power play quarterback, you always got to go for that if that's available to you in a league where, you have a hard time filling your D roster spots with useful players.
Yeah, so Brian, let's say you have to grab a Hab D. You could have Jeff Petrie, who just scored a goal, or you could have Ben Sherratt, who's on the top power play and maybe has slightly better peripherals. Who are you taking for that Monday, Tuesday?
I'll take Ben Sherratt. I'll take the power play quarterback. I'm not. Jeff Petrie's going to have to do more than that to win me back.
Okay, so let's now go to the dregs in terms of percent roster, but not the dregs in terms of my interest. I've got 3 players for you, Brian, that are rostered between 0% and 5% that I'm pretty interested in, starting with Matt Boldy. So we're going back to Minnesota. He's only 3% rostered. Minnesota only played that 1 game last week, but it definitely went well for Boldy, just like Zuccarello, right? He had 1 goal and 1 assist from his spot on the second line with Fialo and Gaudreau. No power play for the Wild in that game, but in the previous game, Boldy was on the top power play, and Minnesota has a slightly better schedule next week. They play Monday and then Friday, Saturday, so you could always at least go for the Monday game and then reassess. But Boldy, how can you not be interested? Maybe he's the guy who's going to help turn around Kevin Fiala's season. I'm into Boldy right now.
Me too. We talked about Boldy in relative to Rossi on a recent show where we're like, they both were lighting up the AHL. We'll see what they can do in the NHL. We both thought that Rossi might be the better choice because he was potentially getting better deployment and had, I don't know if he had the higher pedigree, but the most recent pedigree at least. But Matt Boldy doing really well. 12th overall pick in 2019, seeing some chemistry with Kevin Fiala. I loved that play he made to set up Fiala the other night. I don't know if you saw the GIF but Fiala like scored after Boldy did this amazing zone entry and then passed it to Fiala for essentially. Fiala still did a nice little deke, but Fiala scored. He didn't even celebrate, and like everybody was like in the crowd was up, but Fiala was like pointing to Boldy, and it was more like you should be celebrating, cheer for that guy. I scored the goal, but he made the play. So Matt Boldy looks he looks good. He looks ready. Seeing a lot of nice little clips from him. So I am interested to see what he can do with Kevin Fiala. And hey, that could be good news for Kevin Fiala too.
Yeah, for sure. My comparison right now, at least in my head, I'm seeing Matt Boldy as like Dawson Mercer, with Rossi is like the Alex Holtz there, where everyone is more excited about the other guy. But at least for this season, it seems like it's Mercer and Boldy that are going to be getting the plum deployment to start and maybe produce. So we'll see how Boldy does moving forward. The other two guys I've got for you, I'll just bring them up to you both at once. First of all, on Ottawa, back to Ottawa. So obviously there's that top line. That's been great. Tkachuk, Batherson, and Norris. But you know what? There's a second liner here that's been pretty great as well, and that's Alex Formenton. He had a goal and an assist versus Edmonton on Saturday, 2 assists versus Calgary on Thursday. Before that, he had a 6-shot game versus the Leafs on New Year's. He had a goal and assist versus Philly back on December 18th, which is their like fourth last game. It's not as if I'm like skipping games here. He was playing on, I think, what you'd call the second line with Stützle and Nick Paul in that last game. I feel like no one's really been paying attention to the Sens because they barely play. But at this point, this Alex Formenton looks interesting to me, and he's only 1% rostered on Yahoo. And then someone who's only 0% rostered on Yahoo, going back to defense, I wanted to quickly ask you about a guy named Urho Vakanainen over on Boston, who's been on the top pairing with Charlie McAvoy recently. He hasn't played much this season. He's only played 5 games. He was called up just recently, but in those 5 games, 4 of them he has an assist. So I don't know if it's just luck. Like, I know Boston's been scoring a lot of goals. So Formenton and Vakanainen, if you're looking way down at the 0 and 1% rostered players, are either of them interesting to you? Are either of them doing something that you see as sustainable?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question because neither one is doing a whole. Well, I mean, Vakanainen has these 4 points in 5 games. It doesn't seem sustainable to me, although he is working his way. Like, he came in, played, third pairing minutes, 16, 17 minutes for a couple nights, and then saw 21, 23, and 21 minutes, which is promising to see that he might be used more often. The more often Vakanainen's used, the more likely he could be on the ice with Marchand and Bergeron and Pasternak on either of the top 2 lines, right? Spreading out the offense in Boston might help the defense produce a little better because, there's more than one scoring line. So that could work to Vakanainen's or really any Boston D's favor. So he's someone to watch. I'm glad you pointed him out. I like how you said he's only 0% owned. I don't know if like that can have a qualifiers only. And then Formenton's an interesting one. He's always had like a bit of excitement. I like Alex Formenton and what he did in Belleville in the AHL, mid-second round pick of the Sens back in 2017. He's 22 now. Back in his AHL rookie season a couple years back, Formenton had 53 points in 61 games as a pro rookie, which is great. So I just want to see Formenton get ice time, which is what happened recently. He's playing with Stützle and Connor Brown, which is a fun little line to put together. And I think you just keep an eye on him. He's got 3 multi-point games in his last 4, and the one that he didn't get a point in, he had 6 shots. So yeah, Alex Formenton's looking fun. Honestly, I want Ottawa needs to be fun now, right? They've been waiting so long. I'm so glad they scored like a few games worth of goals in just those 2 against Edmonton and Calgary. They've been laid off so long. I thought there'd be a whole lot more rust on the Sens, but it looks like they're getting straight down to business, and Alex Formenton's getting in on goals. And I think as long as he's putting up points, he's going to keep getting opportunities.
Okay, so there you go. We've gone all through the league. Okay, let me see that. All right, yeah, definitely check out if Formenton is available in your league. He very likely is. And Brian, with that, we've gone all the way from players up at 100% roster down to 0%. So I think that is a show. What a journey we've been on, and I hope everyone listening has enjoyed the ride along with us. If you like the show, of course, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. We wouldn't mind a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you can review the podcast. Give us a little bump there. That would be great. If you can't tell, I'm winding things down now. So I'll continue by also saying that we have our great patron community over on Patreon, and the community is hosted on Discord, and we've got a really fun perk for the patrons. Oh, sorry. And we've got a really... Sorry, everybody. Okay. And the community hosted on Discord. And actually, this is a fun week to become a patron of Keeping Karlsson if you may be interested, because this is Patroncast week, Brian. We're on this Wednesday. We're going to be doing our show where we take all of the questions from the patrons. We have to answer them all no matter how long it takes. So now would be a really fun time to consider becoming a patron of Keeping Karlsson. You go to keepingkarlsson.com/patron, sign up, join our Discord. And if you are already a patron, go right to that January Patroncast question, January Patroncast channel over on the... Patroncast channel over on the Discord and throw your questions in. Then Brian and I will answer them on Wednesday. And that's just one of the many perks we try to give to make it worthwhile to support our show. So if you want to learn more, just go to keepingkarlsson.com/patron. But with that, Brian, like I said, we've talked about quite a few players, so I think we can call this a job well done. So let's cue the outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our group of super supporters, Patty, Rob, David, Derek, Tom, Andrea, Christopher, and Flash. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you to our team of Cupful co-commissions and our Cupful coordinator, Kevin A. Bear, for keeping our patrons only fantasy league running smoothly. kkupfl.com for more details there. Thanks to Shams and of course Elon for keeping the amazing stream of fantasy. Thanks to Shams and of course Elon for keeping the amazing stream of fantasy news rolling on our 3 essential Twitter accounts at Game Day Lions, at Game Day News NHL, and now at Game Day Goalies. Logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and NBC Sports Edge. Oh, and Yahoo.
Great job as always, Brian. I really enjoyed this show. I hope that all you listeners did as well. Like I said, we got a busy week coming up. Ben and Lewis are going to be back at you with a couple short shifts episodes, and right smack in the middle of those, Brian and I will be recording a Patroncast. So the patrons are getting a lot of content over the next few days. So strap in, and while you're waiting for all that, so strap in. Strap in. Brian, let's get out of here. Why don't you go ahead and tell people... what am I doing? I can't even talk. Okay. So strap in. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Brian, what should people do over this next week while they wait for our next mega show?
Please do everything you can to let everybody know that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Nice. All right. Good show. Thanks, everyone, for joining. This was a really fun chat also to watch while we were doing it.
It was a great, shout out to the chat. I almost wanted to shout out the chat in the credits.
Well,
you were all great.
Add it for next week.
Including valuable info, like Shane with the Pedersen fact check and Lewis with the shot chart data. It's great stuff.
Solid crew.
You're all the greatest.
Right. Bye, everyone. I'm gonna head out now. Bye, Brian. Talk to you on Wednesday.
Bye, Elon. Talk to you on Wednesday. Yeah, maybe before then.
I mean, we'll definitely message each other, but I'll hear your nice voice on Wednesday.